All right, we are live. Hello. Thank you so much if you are watching this right now. Hopefully people are coming in here. As usual, you can always support the show by going to patreon.com/Hemant. You can always subscribe to the newsletter at friendlyatheist.com. Please do that if you haven't already. And as we get started, we have so many things to talk about, including some stuff I don't think you have seen anywhere else before. And also, while I have you here, to the, I don't know, two of you watching here, also, Den is here. So if you have comments, questions, leave them in the YouTube comments. I will get to them in between stories. And just a point of privilege, if you do the New York Times crossword puzzle, tomorrow's puzzle, Friday's puzzle, which will be out in a couple of hours from now, that is mine. Do it. Solve it. Let me know what your time was and if you liked it, if you hated it, whatever. I like it when people argue about my stuff. So hope you enjoy that too. Okay, we have so much to talk about tonight. Let's get to some stuff here. Let me pull up. Let me start tonight by talking about all the Rob Reiner stuff because there is a tie-in to religion here too. You may have seen the tweet that Donald Trump made after Rob Reiner was killed by his own son, it appears. And if you aren't familiar with him, he probably made a movie or was involved in a TV show that you absolutely loved, whether it was When Harry Met Sally or This is Spinal Tap or All in the Family. He also made a documentary, or I think he produced a documentary last year called Church and State, which was a documentary about the threat of Christian nationalism. It was a really good documentary. So this guy, it is a loss that we don't have him anymore. But Donald Trump issued this really awful tweet on whatever network he uses now. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but he made Rob Reiner's murder all about himself while trashing him for having politics that are different from his own. Just an absolutely heartless thing for anyone to say. It's insane that it's our president who's saying it, pretending that Rob Reiner, he was for same-sex marriage and he was for liberal policies because he had Trump derangement syndrome and not because Republican ideas are just really bad. But anyway, you've seen that tweet by now. It's been talked about by a lot of people. But I specifically wanted to talk about the way a couple of Christians in particular responded to it. And one of them is from Eric Erickson, who is a right-wing content creator. He's been around for a while, but this is what he said. I just want to highlight a couple things here. Just thinking about the president's reaction to Rob Reiner's death, a relative last night told me he voted for Trump. He likes Trump's policies, but he's exhausted by Trump and embarrassed by the president's behavior. He wished the president would just go off the grid for a while. Instead, we have Trump going off on the murder of Rob Reiner. The president is surrounded by an evangelical team that supposedly prays for him and over him. Never mind that his council of spiritual advisors is led by a heretic. There are lots of evangelicals around the man, but they all seem more concerned with what they can get from him and not at all concerned with the state of his soul and where he will spend eternity. God has placed some prominent evangelicals in Donald Trump's orbit, and they're going to have to give a full accounting of why they did not do more than they did, because the whole project has descended into getting scraps from the table of power at the expense of the president's soul, which is a very on-point thing to say, and also none of this is new. I mean, the evangelicals, the white evangelicals predominantly, though in that evangelical circle of trust, there are a couple of African American preachers as well. But they've known about how awful Trump was for like a decade now, and they've stuck by his side. You think a nasty tweet in the wake of someone's death is going to get them to wake up? No, they didn't care about the Epstein stuff. They didn't care about January 6th. They didn't care about, I can grab them by the you-know-what in 2016. Why on earth would you think they're suddenly going to realize how bad of a situation they're in now? That's what I don't get. I don't like Eric Erickson. He says a lot of stupid stuff. I happen to think this tweet I just read you was more or less on point. But also, why on earth do you think the people surrounding Trump, the evangelical preachers around him, are going to come to their senses now? You're the reason they're like this. They're extremists because right-wing evangelicals, right-wing conservative Republicans have been arguing that this is like some religious crusade. So of course they're going to stick by his side. But that's not even the one that makes me mad. The one that really made me mad is this one by Russell Moore, who I'll say more in a second. This is what Russell Moore said in response to the Donald Trump message. How this vile, disgusting, and immoral behavior has become normalized in the United States is something our descendants will study in school to the shame of our generation. And you know what? He makes a good point. Like, Donald Trump is a vile, disgusting, immoral person. And yeah, it shouldn't be normalized. That guy never should have gotten elected once, much less twice. And yeah, we deserve all the criticism we are bound to get for that. But the reason this particular message, look at the response on this one. It's been retweeted over 5,000 times. It's been liked 29,000 times. Why so much response for a tweet that is not that different from anything you would see anywhere else? Because Russell Moore is not just some random guy. He is a very prominent conservative Christian. And this is where I'm like, I like what you're saying, but come on, man. Where have you been? Because Russell Moore is part of the problem here. And I don't say that lightly. I genuinely appreciate what Russell Moore is saying in this particular case. And I will tell you that Russell Moore has been criticizing Trump for many, many years now. Just to give you some background on this guy, because I think it's important. Russell Moore, until very recently, was the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today, which is like the flagship white evangelical news outlet. He is a former leader in the Southern Baptist Convention, where he ran their Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. He said in an interview with NPR a couple of years ago that one reason religion was struggling, organized religion was struggling, is because a lot of the teachings of Jesus were not being embraced by people in the pews. Because if you tell Christians that they should turn the other cheek, or they should help the least of these, the marginalized people, they would call you weak. He was the one calling them out. Like, that's ridiculous. And the question that was posed to him is, why have so many white evangelicals gone full MAGA? And his response is that feeding the poor and embracing peace and helping the marginalized, which are things Jesus fought for, are now being written off as part of some sort of woke progressive agenda. And he told this story to NPR not that long ago, is that in a lot of these scenarios, if a preacher is talking about turning the other cheek, someone will come up to that preacher and say, where did you get these liberal talking points? And the preacher might say, I'm literally quoting Jesus Christ. And the response is not, oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. The response from the parishioner is something more like, yes, but that doesn't work anymore. That's weak. And if the teachings of Jesus are seen as too woke, they have a problem, like the religion has a problem. And again, I want to know why Russell Moore thinks like he has nothing to do with this. Because again, 80% of white evangelicals have voted for Trump in the last 3 elections. 80%. It's not like, oh, there was a blip in 2016 and they really screwed up. No, they've been this way for a really long time now. And the thing is, Russell Moore has had a front row seat to this for a long time. And yes, he's concerned. He's concerned for all the right reasons. But it's not news that white evangelicals have embraced right-wing extremism. They have always, at least in recent political memory, opposed LGBTQ rights and opposed abortion rights without any exceptions. They oppose public schools teaching comprehensive sex education and reading challenging books and teaching basic science. Those are not recent changes. That's part of the package. And Russell Moore, as a prominent white evangelical Christian, has been riding that train for a long time. So if a president comes around and pays lip service to white evangelicals and the supposed beliefs that they have, and he tells them that you guys are morally right, and he gives them positions of power and access to him, and he nominates judges to the Supreme Court even, and appellate courts and lower courts who are given the white evangelical stamp of approval, yeah, they're gonna embrace him. You think their ethics are gonna come into play now? Why now? They never have before. Like, Christians have been embracing for years now this idea that they are perpetually persecuted and that Democrats are standing in their way. And it doesn't matter what it takes. If it comes to abortion rights, if there is anybody who's going to get rid of abortion rights in America, we're going to stand by that person's side. So what if he's the worst person in America? We're going to stand by him anyway. Who cares what our beliefs are? Who cares what our ethics supposedly are? Like, where was Russell Moore when they were voting this way before Trump? Because I promise you, George W. Bush was also this awful. Mitt Romney was not any better. Like, again, Russell Moore is one of the most anti-Trump critics in a religious denomination full of MAGA cultists. So kudos to him for that. He deserves credit for that. He called on Trump to resign during his first term. He said he would have voted for Trump's second impeachment, the January 6th one, if he were in Congress. But the implication is that if more evangelicals were just like Russell Moore, like all of Christianity would be better off. And the problem with that is that, no, white evangelicals today are not the problem. White evangelical Christianity is the problem. The beliefs associated with it are the problem. Because guess what else Russell Moore believes? He's not a fan of Donald Trump, but you know what he is a fan of? He is also anti-LGBTQ rights. He doesn't think trans people are people. He thinks women should be forced to give birth against their will. He still defends pro-Trump Christians who voted their conscience, as if their support for Trump was guided by anything rational. Like, this guy in 2021, after the first Trump term, he joined a church that was not affiliated with the Southern Baptists, but like that church was led by a guy who signed off on one of the most anti-LGBTQ documents in evangelical history. It's a church that believes only qualified men can hold leadership roles. That's where Russell Moore is today, as far as I know. Like, is that really the more ethical form of Christianity he wishes everyone would embrace? Because I promise you, that's going to end in the same place Trump is now. It is just as monstrous as the version of Christianity Russell Moore is condemning now. Like, you're the best apple in a rotting orchard. It doesn't make you an apple anyone wants to eat. You know what I mean? Russell Moore left the Southern Baptists, he said, because he was disturbed by the racism and the sexual abuse, which is important. I'm glad he left. But he also thinks Christians should go right along with the Southern Baptist bigotry and sexism in areas that he agrees with. So, like, why is that any better? Christianity Today, the publication he led until very recently, still thinks committed gay and lesbian couples are, quote, destructive to society. So just because Russell Moore can say all this stuff with a smile on his face or with what appears to be calm, rational statements, it doesn't make what he is saying okay. I'm glad he's in agreement with the rest of the rational world on the Trump stuff. Where is he on everything else? Like, why doesn't he have the courage to state the obvious when he does when it comes to Trump? The obvious being we are all worse off because white evangelicals and conservative Christians decided to vote on their most extremist beliefs instead of doing what would have been best for the country, including the marginalized, including the oppressed, right? Like, the Southern Baptist Convention was a garbage dumpster fire of theology long before 2016. You could have said something then. You didn't. Atheists as a whole were way ahead of him on this one. So unless he's willing to admit that his core principles, a lot of which stem from these broken beliefs that led white evangelicals to support Trump, unless he can admit those beliefs are also a problem, then he's not doing his religion any favors. And this is not just me ranting on one dude. The reason I got mad is because when I saw Russell Moore's tweet, which again is such a good thing, and I'm glad he said it. I'm glad he said this. I saw so many people praising him for being a voice of reason. Like, why can't more Christians be like you? Where, if a prominent evangelical can say something like this, why isn't everyone else falling in line? And I'm like, why are all of you praising this guy when he is not getting to the heart of the problem? Yes, what Trump said is awful. We know that. It shouldn't take much effort to say Trump is an insane, delusional madman. But also, what led us to this point is that Russell Moore was too afraid to call out white evangelical Christians for their bigotry and their sexism, and he's still fine with it today. And if that's the case, we are no better off with his beliefs. So I appreciate this tweet, but like, let's limit it to that. And let's not pretend conservative Christians, and by the way, there were a couple of Republicans who spoke out against Trump this week about this tweet as well. That's nice. Marjorie Taylor Greene has gotten a lot of praise from a lot of Democrats in recent months because she's backing away from the MAGA crazies, right? Like, you've seen her do interviews with 60 Minutes and get all this, do interviews with normal people for once. And yet, like yesterday, she was leading the charge for an anti-trans resolution where she spewed her bigotry on the House floor. She is not a good person. She doesn't get credit for saying what a lot of progressive Democrats have been saying for years now. Like, glad you came to the party even though you're completely late, but that's about it. You're not the leader of this. You're not doing anything courageous. Other people were doing it long before you were. Why don't you give us credit for being right on this? Because your religion did not lead you to this place. It made me mad to see the praise for that tweet. That's all. I don't have anything else on this. If you have any questions, let's go. Otherwise, I will jump to a totally different story. Man, scraps at the table of power. Gotta admit that it's hard. Nice writing. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad from Eric Erickson. I wish he would have this courage to speak out against fellow Christians all the time, not just now when it's so damn obvious. Everyone thinks they're the good guys, and everyone has a limit before they think someone's a bad guy. It's just wild to see when a bad guy's limit makes another bad guy bad. That's a very interesting way of putting it. Yeah, I'm surprised that this is the thing that crossed the line for so many people, because when I saw Trump's tweet, or whatever you want to call it, about Rob Reiner, I'm like, yeah, that tracks. I wasn't expecting him to do anything decent. It's a day that ends in Y. And yet for some people, they were like, I don't know, this thing broke them for some reason. I'm surprised that did it. For what it's worth, Rob Reiner, when Charlie Kirk was murdered, Rob Reiner actually spoke out against that, called it an awful tragedy despite their differences. It was a very normal thing to say from someone who has compassion. And yet you can see from a lot of people on the right, including the leader of the Republicans, there's no compassion when a Democrat dies. All right, I'm jumping to another story. Give me a second here. All right. All right. Let's talk about something good for like a minute. There was actually good news coming out of Oklahoma this week, and it involves this dude right here, Ryan Walters. You thought he was gone. He kind of is, but You may remember Ryan Walters. He was the superintendent of public instruction, the leader of public schools in Oklahoma. But then, a few months ago, he decided to quit and take a job in the nonprofit world where he can try to bust unions from afar, bust teachers' unions from afar. So that's what Ryan Walters is doing now. But the reason I bring him up is because this week, the Oklahoma Supreme Court shot down one of the things he was hoping would be his legacy. And it is glorious to see. And it's important to talk about because Ryan Walters wanted to impose Christian nationalism upon everybody. He rewrote the standards for social studies classes for everyone in public school. And that is the thing shot down by the Supreme Court. So I've made videos about this before, but let me give you a quick rundown of what happened here. Last December, like a year ago, Ryan Walters got these standards passed, and they were basically ignored by the Republican legislature later on in the year. But they basically told teachers to tell kids that the 2020 election had major discrepancies, even though it didn't, to teach them that COVID originated in a Chinese lab, even though there's no proof of that. They would not be required to learn about George Floyd's death or Black Lives Matter or anything like that. And the reason all this is an issue is the last time the social studies standards were updated was in 2019. And what are social studies standards? Basically, the state says all the public schools, this is the bare minimum you have to teach kids in this subject area. Like in kindergarten, these are the things they got to learn. In 12th grade, these are the things they got to learn. And the thing is, those were written in 2019. They were approved in 2019, and that's fine. Like, that's what happened then. But like, a lot has happened in the past 5 years. And if you're teaching social studies or politics, history, US history classes, you're going to want to talk and teach kids about what happened in the 2020 election, what's going on now. Because guess what? People don't watch the news. They don't read newspapers. So you want to include that stuff. So every few years, states revise their standards to update them where they need to be updated. So it's not weird that Oklahoma was considering updating its social studies standards. What was weird is that Ryan Walters was injecting lies into the standards, which he hoped would force teachers to have to teach those lies to kids. And like I said, he was teaching them the 2020 election was rigged. It was not rigged. Things like that. In addition to that, he also jammed in a lot of Christian bullshit. He had a lot of stuff in those standards that treated the Bible like a foundational document. Kids had to learn about our Judeo-Christian founding of our country. They had to learn about what Jesus preached. Like, why? That's not history. That's not part of American government. Our laws are not based on the 10 Commandments, but that's the way he wanted to sneak it in there. And that's what he tried to do. Now, last December, when he proposed these standards, it made national news because people were looking at it and they're like, there's a lot of Jesus in here. Even in the press release at the time, Ryan Walters is like, he said, and I quote, "These standards mention the Bible and its historical impact over 40 times." And then, quote, "Oklahoma is putting the Bible and the historical impact of Christianity back in school." So, like, he was bragging about how much religion he jammed in there when they were first proposed. Another thing he had in there, the standard said kids need to summarize the political impact of President Clinton's impeachment, which is fine. That's a thing, kids should have to reckon with if they're learning about, the late 90s politics. But also, they made no mention of Donald Trump's 2 impeachments, even though those were important. And the reason those standards had so much right-wing propaganda is because all of those standards were written by right-wing propagandists. He brought in the conservative group PragerU, like the fake right-wing school. He brought in someone from the American Enterprise Institute and the president of the Heritage Foundation, the group that did Project 2025. There were no public school teachers on that committee. There were no administrators on that committee. And yet, Walters took their recommendations and made everything worse. But here's where it got really interesting. In February, after the public had seen version 1.0 of the standards and they got to weigh in, and there were articles written about it, in February, the State Board of Education had to vote to approve those standards. And Governor Kevin Stitt, who is a Republican, but not a fan of Ryan Walters, he appointed new members to the Board of Education. Maybe they could stop Ryan Walters from doing the thing you knew he wanted to do. But Walters said, hey guys, here's the revised social studies standards. You got to vote on these tomorrow. And they're looking at this giant packet and they're like, this is really big. We don't really have time to go through all this if you want us to vote on it tomorrow. And Ryan Walters said, you have to, because the legislature needs to take it up. There's no time left. We have to vote on it tomorrow. That was a lie. They could have voted a month later and it would have been fine. He didn't tell them that. And the thing he did not tell them also is that he changed the standards from the crappy version everyone saw in December to an even crappier version in February. This is something quoted by Judd Legum in Popular Information, his newsletter. Walters did not send the new standards with his additions to the members of the board until 4 p.m. the day before their 9:30 a.m. meeting. This didn't give members enough time to read the new standards, which are around 400 pages long. Some of the members said later they did not even realize that the new standards were different from the earlier version they had previously reviewed. So he rushed them into voting on it, and he made them do it. And so all this happened. For what it's worth, the legislature of Oklahoma could have stopped it after that. They did not. So these revised standards that no one saw in advance, they passed. And that was the problem. So what were the changes he made to the revised version? Well, the original lesson plan taught students about the challenges and accomplishments of Joe Biden's presidency. The revised version that no one saw only focused on the challenges and did not say students needed to learn anything good. Biden did. The original version said students should be able to describe the economic recovery after COVID-19, like the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. The new version that Ryan Walters didn't allow anyone to see only asked students to describe the U.S.-Mexico border crisis and America's withdrawal from Afghanistan and like the Gaza-Israel conflict. Basically, anything that might make Democrats look responsible and good, he got out of there, right? And there was a lot of Bible stuff too. I'm not going to go over all of that, but that is what was in the revised standards. So that was also a problem. I mentioned this in another video, but because they passed this revised standards that were full of lies, one of the issues that was bound to come up is how are you going to get textbooks for the new material? Because any company that actually wants to sell textbooks across the country, if they make a watered down version of social studies textbooks that are full of lies, their reputation will be damaged, and other schools from other states are not going to want to buy their material. So, like, how are you going to get good material on this? That would have been a problem. But in any case, after these standards passed, there was a lawsuit filed. And this lawsuit was filed by Americans United for Separation of Church and State and the Oklahoma Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. But specifically, I want to show you what their lawsuit said. They said at the time, there's a bunch of reasons this thing is illegal. And specifically, I know this is a giant paragraph here, but check this out. The 2025 standards are unlawful and invalid for many procedural and substantive reasons. And I'm not going to read all of this, but this goes on for a while here. But here's what they were saying in their lawsuit. Broadly speaking, the standards were never shown. The revised standards that Ryan Walters was jamming through, they were never shown to the public in advance. And that violates the state's Open Meetings Act. Like, the public should be allowed to see your agenda and what you're voting on. He didn't do that. By voting on the standards without knowing what was in them, the State Board of Education violated the law to have authority over academic standards. They didn't even know they were voting on something new. The standards also, the lawsuit said, forced teachers to spread lies, which violates a state law that says what you teach in schools has to be accurate. Also, there were some other things they pointed out too, but like those were the main ones. And the last time I think I made a video about all of this stuff, there were a couple things I pointed out that were really interesting about this case. One was that the lead plaintiff was not some fire breathing atheist. It was actually the Reverend Dr. Mitch Randall of Norman, Oklahoma. He's an ordained Baptist minister and the CEO of a religious nonprofit group. But he said this: as a Christian, I object to Oklahoma's new social studies standards that require teachers to deceive students by presenting inaccurate information as fact. To reduce the Bible to a history book rather than treating it as a theological text does a disservice to public school students, their families, their teachers, and to those who consider the Bible to be a book of faith. And then get this: as a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, I'm especially bothered by my tax dollars supporting state-mandated religious instruction. It's a painful reminder of the forced religious proselytization my family members experienced in Native American boarding schools in Oklahoma. I urge the court to protect religious freedom for all Oklahomans and prevent implementation of these new standards. So that's their lead plaintiff, and they got a lot more where he came from. So last time I made a video about all of this was in September, because the Oklahoma Supreme Court, they said, wow, school is starting soon and they're supposed to use these new standards. We need to weigh in on this now. And they voted 5-2 to put a temporary block on the new standards. Basically, they said, we're going to rule on this. Like, we're not waiting for lower courts to weigh in. We will issue a ruling. But for now, do not use the new standards. Use the 2019 old version. And that's fine, because any public school then could say, well, we do have to teach kids about what's happened since 2019, but we can figure that out on our own. We don't need the state telling us what to do. The other reason that Supreme Court halt was a good thing is because state lawmakers, who are like almost all Republicans, they allocated $33 million toward creating tests and conducting teacher trainings and purchasing textbooks for the revised standards. And the Supreme Court said, do not spend that money because we don't know if these standards are going to be in place. So that was interesting. And here's the big update for all of you today. This week, the Oklahoma Supreme Court finally weighed in on this case permanently, not just a temporary block. They weighed in on it for real. And this is the part in a 30-page decision. This is the part that's interesting. We grant declaratory relief. That's good news for church-state separation. And conclude that the Board of Education approved 2025 standards by using a procedure that violated ... the state's Open Meeting Act. And because of that, the 2025 standards are not enforceable, and the 2019 standards remain in force. So basically, because Ryan Walters jammed those standards through and didn't follow the law in terms of making this stuff public in advance, not letting the board members read this in advance, he violated all the rules. So the Supreme Court said those standards are not legitimate. Maybe it's on a technicality, but it's the same end result either way. What Ryan Walters wanted to do is nullified. His standards are out the window. That is fantastic news. In case you're wondering, it was a 5-4 decision this time, and there were 2 other judges involved in this case who recused themselves. But honestly, even among the dissenters, they were like, it's not that we disagree on principle. We just wish that lower courts had weighed in on this first. I don't think you needed to come to the Supreme Court as your first stop. Whatever. I mean, time is of the essence, so that's why the Supreme Court took it up. But even the dissenters are like, we basically agree with what's being said here. So that is wonderful news. I also wanted to show you one last thing. Lyndall Fields, who is the new superintendent of public instruction, he basically issued a statement saying, yeah, we're fine with this. We will work on getting new standards in place. And we're going to make sure, he said, we are committed to transparency and adherence to the Open Meeting Act. And they're going to develop new standards in the proper way. So great. I hope he does that. Everything I've seen so far suggests, even though he's a Republican, he is a guy who's basically by the book. And this is by the book. In case you're wondering about Ryan Walters, he's infuriated because he's perpetually infuriated. This is what he tweeted this week. The Oklahoma Supreme Court just gave parents, kids, and Donald Trump a lump of coal for Christmas. To be fair, Donald Trump deserves that. Teachers unions and liberals have weaponized our court, and it must stop. Like, my dude, you think the Oklahoma Supreme Court is too liberal? Like, Oklahoma's the reddest state, arguably one of the reddest states in the country. I promise you, their Supreme Court is not woke. You're just dumb and you don't know how to do things the right way. And they said, yeah, Ryan Walters is dumb and he doesn't know how to do things the right way. So his fake standards that he jammed through are not in effect. Like, if Ryan Walters was smarter, he could have gotten what he wanted, but he's not. This is something else he said in that video that just made me laugh. They struck down history standards, spitting in the face of so many Oklahomans, and frankly, common sense. These judges should be ashamed of themselves. No, not even close. They struck down lies that white evangelicals like to tell themselves. But the end result is that's good news for students who are trying to get into college. It's good news for anyone who cares about education. It's good news for people who value the truth. I don't know. This was never just about social studies standards, though. This is a question about whether Oklahoma would allow its public schools to be turned into religious indoctrination camps by guys like Walters. Like, he tried to erase references to systemic racism. He tried to spread right-wing lies. He tried to elevate the Bible to the level of the Constitution when it came to what kids ought to learn in school. He just wanted to weaponize ignorance. And he wants to churn out another generation of kids who don't know what propaganda looks like. And that Supreme Court decision we saw this week, it puts a stop to that. So that's great. I mean, Oklahoma is still struggling when it comes to education. They're ranked like 49, no matter what metric you use. But now at least they have people in charge who seem to care about education and the students. And so that is good news. And guess what? Ryan Walters is still gone. So all he can do is complain from a distance. He gave up his power to actually do something about it. So that's fantastic news. All around, I will pause there. What questions we got here for this story? Oh, thank you for gifting those memberships. That's very nice. Are there any changes that Walters made that survive his tenure? You know, I am struggling to figure out what he has done other than, I mean, he was like withholding money that was appropriated to schools, but I don't think that's still in effect anymore. I think this was one of the changes he thought would last because they've wiped the website clean of his religious press releases. The website looks professional now for the State Department of Education. Ryan Walters made it a vanity project. This was the biggest way Ryan Walters was trying to get his stamp and leave his legacy. You may recall he tried to get Bibles into classrooms, but through lawsuits and districts just saying, no, we're not playing this game, he never got his way on that. But this was a set of standards that the State Board of Education voted on. And the state lawmakers, they could have stopped it. They decided not to. So this may have been his biggest legacy, and it's gone now, which is good because it never should have been approved in the first place. All right, I'm jumping to another story. Give me a moment here. Oh, you are going to like the next one. This isn't a trivia question. What are we doing here? Yeah, it is. All right. I'm going to show you video in a second that you're going to flip out when you see. But let me set this up for you. You may have heard that in recent months there's been a push in some red states to have chapters of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's group, in every high school. So like Texas has tried to do this, Oklahoma has tried to do this. The weird thing is, no one was ever stopping kids from forming clubs at these schools. And if they wanted to form like Turning Point USA or whatever the high school version of that is, they could have done it a year ago. They could have done it first semester, whenever. But in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, they've been saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make sure every school has one of these chapters. It's like, yeah, if anyone's interested, they can form it. They have the right to do it, whatever. And by the way, that's true. Like anyone can start any group as long as you meet the requirements of whatever your school district says are the requirements. That's been a thing for a long time now. That's why if there's a Bible club after school, you can have a secular student alliance group. You can have an after school Satan group. You can have chess club. It doesn't matter. If they allow after school clubs, you could have some right wing, let's get together and talk about how hard it is to be white groups. But a lot of students don't want that. So I don't really, all the grandstanding in Texas and Oklahoma, like we're going to make sure every school has a Charlie Kirk group. It's stupid because no one was stopping it from happening. In any case, in California, there is a high school that has one of these groups. It's 12 Bridges High School, and they have a group called Club America, which is the high school version of Turning Point USA. So they had their first meeting this month, last week actually, December 11th, and they decided to invite the conservative mayor of their city to speak to them. Her name is Holly Andreatta, and she was first elected to the Lincoln, California City Council in 2018. And because they rotate who is mayor, she's now been mayor twice. I think she just ended her second mayoral stint like last week. So she's very recent mayor. In addition to that, she is an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God. She is a pastor at Lincoln Christian Life Center. She is an adjunct professor at Epic Bible College and Graduate School. And she's now running to become her county supervisor, like a different elected position. So I get why the kids might want to invite her. As far as Republicans in that city go, she's one of the Republican celebrities, right? She's an elected official. So I get why they invited her. So she came to their group at their first meeting to speak to them. And some student who attended the meeting quietly decided to take out their phone and videotape the whole thing. And she did not know she was being videotaped. And she went on and just spoke her heart out and said all the stupid shit you expect a conservative to say. And it was like a 30-minute speech. The Sacramento Bee newspaper published about 6 minutes of excerpts, and I'm going to play a bunch of them for you right now. Here's the first one, and then we will talk about it.
When you say you have to have 50% black pilots and we need to get it done now, then what do you need to do to get that larger percentage? You have to lower the standards. And when you lower the standards, just like in anything, if you lower the standards and you're not being properly trained how to fly a commercial jet, you put people in danger. So he's not saying black people aren't smart enough to be pilots, or women aren't smart enough to be pilots, or whatever. Put any descriptor you want in there. What he's saying is when you create this large DEI percentage and then you lower the standards, that puts people in harm's way. Does that make sense? Well, actually, in a lot of industries, they did. In the pilots, in the industry, they did say 50% black pilots. They did say that. And so a lot of the industries do. They have these metrics. So that is happening.
There's a lot of stuff she said there. I don't know if it was easy to hear what she was saying, but basically a student asked her to comment on a racist thing Charlie Kirk once said. And what she said is that when you have to have 50% black pilots, Well, how do you reach that quota? How do you get that larger percentage? You have to lower the standards. She said, in the industry, they did say 50% black pilots. They did say that. She was referencing something Charlie Kirk said. He said, and I'm quoting here, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. And the best case interpretation of that is that Charlie Kirk's gut reaction, if he ever saw a black pilot, was that that person must not be fit for the job. They probably got here because of diversity requirements. They're not good enough to do it. She is echoing that. And what she said is, yeah, if you have to have 50% black pilots, that means you got to lower the standards. Well, guess what? I looked it up. She's lying about everything she was saying here. Check this out. United Airlines actually published this in 2021. I think this is what Charlie Kirk was talking about. United sets a new diversity goal. 50% of students at their new pilot training academy they're hoping they will be women and people of color. And this is what they said at the beginning. United Airlines, the only major US airline to own a flight school, will begin accepting applications today as it embarks on an ambitious plan to train 5,000 new pilots by 2030, at least half of them women and people of color. And if you read through this entire press release, what they're saying is, look, we need more pilots. We have to have them. So we opened our own pilot training school. We want 5,000 people who will go through our training. And by the way, what's the big holdup to why people don't want to become pilots? What United was saying is the biggest holdup tends to be it's a long time and it costs a lot of money to go through that sort of training. But guess what? United was saying, we have companies we're working with that are going to pay the tuition for you. So as long as you're willing to commit to the program, you don't have to worry about tuition. And by taking away that particular barrier, they were hoping they could attract the sort of people they don't usually get to join pilot training schools. That's why they were saying, we have a goal, not a requirement, but a goal of having 50% of these pilots we are training to be women and people of color. Is that a quota? No, it's not. It's a goal. They removed the biggest barrier that stopped those groups from doing it. And this is the biggest thing. They were not saying, if there's a black person, we're going to allow them to skip a bunch of the lessons. No, you still have to meet all the requirements, but the barrier for entry, they were trying to destroy in a good way. And that is a good thing. That's all they were saying. And this lady who's speaking to the group is like, well, if you have to have 50% black pilots, they must have lowered the standards. Not even close to what happened. She just racist. So that's the first thing she said. Then she decided to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. So you know this is going to go well.
Okay, a lot of research has come out that Martin Luther King was a Marxist and that he was for socialism, and a lot of the civil rights things that he advocated for were not really helpful. Now there's a lot of research to that, but we can argue about that. That's kind of what you said. And also,
Martin Luther King, she said, was a Marxist, and I believe she said he was a socialism. I had to watch that a few times, but I think that is what she said. She also said a lot of the civil rights things that he advocated for were not really helpful. I wish she would have elaborated. I would like to know, which civil rights things do you oppose exactly? Because she's not really helping defeat any of the racist accusations. But also, like, what do you mean? You're calling MLK a socialist, a Marxist. What do those terms mean to you? Like, I know they sound scary. I know conservatives love using those buzzwords to make every Democrat sound crazy. And yet, if you just ask people like, hey, Bernie Sanders, a Democratic socialist, Bernie Sanders says there's wealth inequality. The wealthy are hoarding all of our money. That's the reason things cost so much, why you can't get housing, things like that. And guess what? When you just put it like that, a lot of people across the political spectrum tend to agree. That's why affordability was such a big thing in the recent elections. in November and in all the special elections since. So does that make you a socialist? Is that a bad thing? Is that what we're arguing about? Who knows? I mean, Zoran Mamdani won his Democratic primary, even though he was called a Marxist, a socialist, because the ideas he was fighting for were just universally ones people cared about. So if you want to say MLK is a Marxist, a socialist, you have to explain what it is you have a problem with, instead of just using scary words to make people think there's something wrong with him. All right. The next thing she talked about is being gay, because everyone was waiting to hear her thoughts on this. And she decided to talk about her own daughter, who happens to be gay. I'm sure that family dynamic is fantastic. And she wants you to know she absolutely loves the gays. But listen carefully and see if you can hear her explanation for why people are gay.
My oldest daughter had a lot of trauma as a child. Something really terrible happened to her when she was very young that I would hope never would happen to any other child. And as a result of it, she's a lesbian, she's gay, and she's married to a woman. And sometimes that's a little bit of internal struggle for me, because I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and I believe that scripture is very clear on homosexuality. But on the other side of that, I love her dearly. We are in relationship. And that's what Charlie Kirk's message was. Is like, we may not agree. My daughter knows where I stand biblically, but I love her. We're actually going to spend Christmas with her in Missouri. We love her. And we have a child, and I love my grandchild. And I love my daughter-in-law, which is weird to say, right? My daughter's married to a woman, but it is the reality.
I promise you, Charlie Kirk did not love the people he was denigrating constantly. But in any case, what she said is just plain stupid. Okay, what happened to her daughter as a child, as traumatic as that may have been, I don't know what it was, that is not the reason she's a lesbian. But that is very much a belief that has taken hold among anti-LGBTQ bigots, conservative preachers, right? It's easy to find sermons where they say, you're gay because of something that happened to you as a kid. That's not how gay works. Sorry. Hate to burst your bubble on that one. You can have a perfectly fine, trauma-free childhood and still be gay. I mean, it's probably not a very interesting life at that point. What are you going to talk about? But it's true. Like, there are gay people who come from a diverse set of circumstances from all places. That is also true of straight people. I don't know why I have to explain this. This seems like obvious at this point. I feel like young people know that better than anybody. Like, yeah, people just are gay. Why are we making a thing out of it? I was very taken aback by the way Andriata made it sound like she deserves some sort of prize for spending time with her granddaughters despite having a lesbian daughter. Like, why would it be weird to say you love your daughter-in-law, other than that's not the expectation in conservative Christian circles where they are just preaching hate all the time? Like, do you want a prize? Do you want a cookie? What? Like, yeah, you'll love your extended family too. Why would that be weird? Anyway, then she decided to trash what I can only believe is some sort of troll who criticizes her online. But I don't even think this person is a troll. I think this is just someone who criticizes her. And this is what Andriata said about her critic.
There's an individual in Placer County that she's a very lost soul, and my friends, we pray for her. And she likes to trash me online. She trashes other conservative leaders, other elected officials. She says the most horrible things. I'm not concerned, because what she does is she takes things out of context, and that's a dangerous place.
I mean, keeping that last thing she said, that critic takes things out of context. I feel like we're seeing plenty of context in this video, and it doesn't make this person look good. So, I mean, just keep that one in mind. Also, I'm not surprised she's getting criticism from someone whom she claims is a lost soul. Right? All right. What else do we got? She also spoke out against Christian nationalism. Not against Christian nationalism, but against the idea that it exists and that people don't like it, and that she gets called a Christian nationalist. Here is that.
You know, Christian nationalist and all these names, that's just a name that the left made up to silence people. I am a Christian and I love my nation. Okay, if I'm a Christian nationalist, but they use it in a negative way. But people are afraid to have those labels.
Oh my God. She's like, I'm a Christian, I'm a nationalist, but you make Christian nationalists sound like such a bad thing. Like, I promise you, no one cares if you're a politician who is Christian and patriotic. But if you think your faith should dictate the laws that everyone outside your religious bubble have to live by, despite, depriving them of marriage licenses and health care and forcing them to treat your religion as if it's the default for the country, then you're a Christian nationalist in the worst sense of that phrase, and you are a problem that needs to be politically defeated. I don't know why she doesn't get that. She thinks people use the term Christian nationalist to go after Christians. No. There are plenty of Christian politicians who are great. I have no problem with them. I disagree with their religious views. They're wrong. But it doesn't matter because they're fighting for the good policies. They're fighting for policies they may personally disagree with, but that they know are good in a secular country. I'm fine with those people. She is not one of those people. Then what else? Oh, she wanted the kids to know that people like her are awesome. They don't discriminate. They are loving conservative people.
Now, let me just clarify. We need to love everybody. We do not need to discriminate. You may not agree with somebody's lifestyle, but we love them and we're kind to them. You can have a difference of opinion. It doesn't mean that you're hateful. Don't let the world or politics or the left put a label on you because to silence you, right? You have to, and you also need to fear God, not fear man. That's the tactic that the other side uses, that people who are being used of the devil, they use that tactic to make you.
Look, I swear, if we treated conservative Christians the way they treat the rest of us, their brains would explode. Like, they could not take it. They're so used to receiving royal treatment and using Christian love as a weapon to hurt everyone they hate. They have no idea what it's like to actually be persecuted. They do discriminate. They do not love other people. They are not kind. They like to think they are. And then they surround themselves with other conservative Christians who constantly praise them. But like, being on the receiving end of that, I will tell you, they're not loving. They're not kind. They are awful politicians. If they just had these beliefs and stayed in their church walls, I swear I wouldn't care. Also, people on the right are not and never have been silenced. That's ridiculous. Okay, at this point, at some point in the speech, a student who is not a Charlie Kirk fan and would not want to be a member of this club, she showed up at this meeting. She decided to ask a question of Andreata. And what this student is saying is, I think, and I'm paraphrasing here, you keep saying we're all safe here, that you're kind, that people who disagree are going to be fine, that we're safe. But I don't feel safe because of the things you are saying. So, and she's saying this in the student is saying this in the best way possible. First of all, kudos to this student for speaking up and pointing this out. I want you to just draw some encouragement from the fact that there are teenagers who talk like this, and then listen to the response the student gets from Andreata. I believe that is the
right. I hope you understand that things that Charlie Kirk said would make someone like me, who is a genderqueer pansexual socialist, feel unsafe. I feel unsafe because of some of the comments that he made about women. I understand you said, please don't take this out of context, but when he was asked, if your 10-year-old child was raped and there was going to be a baby made out of it and both of them were going to survive, would the baby have been born? And he said yes. I hope that can make some people pause, because that would be an incredibly, if that happened to me at 10, I feel like my consent would have been completely wrong. So I hope that there's an understanding here that as much as we don't want to disagree, there is a lot of feelings of unsafetyness because of just this club and just a bunch of.
There's nothing unsafe about this room, and I understand what you're saying with Charlie, but again, I think maybe ask yourself this question. Do you feel unsafe by some of the things Charlie said? Because that's what, and I'm sorry if the term the left offended you. I didn't mean that to offend you, but that's how we, right, left, middle, whatever, right? Okay. Because maybe that's what the media and what people are saying now. It's like, oh, he said this, or he's this or that, or whatever. Maybe if you actually spend some time actually listening to what he said, I mean, yes, he advocated for.
That last line is something that the mayor said, maybe if you actually spent some time listening to what Charlie Kirk said, then the student would feel differently. And the student's like, no, I listened to what he said, and Charlie Kirk did not make me feel safe. And the thing she was referencing, I should say, I don't know the student's pronouns, but the thing that student was saying was the student was referencing an argument Charlie Kirk made that if his own 10-year-old daughter were, heavens forbid, raped and impregnated, someone asked him, would you allow your daughter to have an abortion? And he said, no, I would want my child to have the baby. And it's a horrifying situation to even think about as a hypothetical. But the bigger issue, and the reason this student felt unsafe, is because what Kirk was arguing is that no one should be allowed to make that decision. He wanted to make it for them. That's what anti-abortion zealots want. Even in that horrific, extreme situation involving a 10-year-old who is impregnated, the anti-abortion crowd doesn't think that child or that child's family should be allowed to make a choice about what happens. They want to force that kid to have the baby. That's why things Charlie Kirk said, would make people feel unsafe. That's also what Andriana believes. And yet she has this audacity to claim there's nothing unsafe about that kind of belief. Because when she says it, she's talking calmly and she's smiling. Don't you understand? And then at the end of all that, she's like, maybe if you listen to what Charlie Kirk said, as if the student didn't know what he said. No, I promise you, the things Charlie Kirk said were perfectly shitty in context as well. Then this lady decided to talk about atheists. So you're going to love this bit. She has a lot to say about people who are atheists and who support separation of church and state.
I even respect people who are atheists, although I think that it takes a lot more faith to be an atheist than it does to believe that there's a higher power and a creative designer, right? But of course I respect other people.
When you think about this, what do you think about separation of church and state? And do you value other religions as well as atheism, just as do you understand that they're the same value as Christianity and Catholicism?
Well, that's a really good question. So I'll tell you, I just spoke to a whole group of students in the LDS church. I'm not Mormon, but I love them. I have a lot of friends. I respect what they believe. Separation of church and state is a myth. Okay, it's not in the Constitution. Our world has flipped that and tried to say that there's no place for faith in the public life, and so that's not really what he meant. So to answer your question like this, now when I'm on city council, I don't sit up on the dais and preach a sermon. That's inappropriate, right? We're there to do city business, but the decisions that I make, and we don't really deal with political stuff on city council, but if I was to do higher office or whatever, the decisions that I make are based on my biblical worldview, just like my colleagues that make their decisions are based on their biblical or not biblical worldview, right?
I mean, how many times have we heard that Geisler, Turek, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist argument, right? This idea that atheists require more faith than Christians is bullshit. It's been debunked repeatedly. But it is funny when I hear Christian apologists use that line, because it doesn't take extraordinary faith to dismiss ordinary bullshit. I am much more concerned about an elected official claiming church-state separation is a myth because those words don't appear in the Constitution. Abortion isn't in the Constitution. You don't seem to care about that whatsoever. In any case, separation of church and state is how our courts have interpreted the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment for decades and decades. And yes, there is historical precedent for that as well. Also, separation of church and state does not mean there is no place for faith in public life. We know that because conservative Christians constantly shove their faith in public life without a problem. Have you ever watched a post-game football interview? They do it all the time. Politicians talk about their faith all the time. It's legal. It's fine. I'll roll my eyes, but it's fine. It's only an issue when government treats religion or Christianity specifically as the only game in town. And that's what they usually do, like erecting a nativity scene outside City Hall, but not allowing other groups that same sort of access. That's the problem. The fact that this woman doesn't get that, or willfully chooses not to get that, is why she has no business in public office now, or my goodness, higher office in the future. So, those are the things she said in this entire thing. By the way, I know someone was commenting, like, what's the source for this video? I see the Bee. Isn't that like a right-wing satirical website? No, this is the Sacramento Bee. It's a legit newspaper. I promise you, they got access to that video. I will say, if you ever needed a reason to defend having these conservative clubs on high school campuses, this is it. They create a platform that allows the public to see all these conservatives and why they are not worth listening to. Because when you give them a microphone and let them loose, it turns out they just say a lot of dumb shit. So, like, yay, we need more Charlie Kirk clubs at schools everywhere. I love it. This woman spoke off the cuff and revealed so much about her moral compass being broken that even students who attended that meeting in good faith called her out on it in real time. You just saw that in the video. And in fact, this week there was a school board meeting and her speech was a topic of discussion. Well, guess what? The creator of this club got up on stage, or got up in front of the mic, and decided to defend this. He looks exactly as you think he would look for starting this club. But look at this. Club chapter founder Garrett Culp publicly defended his club. Let's see what he says. My purpose with Club America is to host and create respectful dialogue and to uphold the principles of American exceptionalism and Christianity, he said. I am not a hateful person, nor is my club a hateful group. We are simply students trying to foster conversations between people of different opinions. While those topics and opinions may be uncomfortable for some, I assure you they are not hateful. Like, if you have to defend your club as one that is not hateful after one meeting, maybe your club is the problem. And yes, it is hateful to say that being gay is the result of childhood trauma, which is what this invited speaker did. And it's ignorance to pretend that is not what's happening. It is factually untrue. It contributes to discrimination against LGBTQ people. Like, guys like that do not care about what that sort of rhetoric does to their classmates because they don't care about anyone but themselves. This whole idea, like, facts don't care about your feelings. The problem with that is not that it's theoretically untrue. Of course, we should be guided by facts. But the idea that feelings don't matter, that you could treat someone like shit because you think you have the upper ground with the facts, like, that is a purely Republican thing these days, where empathy is a bad word. This idea that, I mean, if that makes you uncomfortable. Did you listen to the students who spoke up while the speaker was there? They didn't sound like they were upset. They sounded pissed because the speaker was lying to them and could not defend herself. Sounds like they know more about how to argue things than she did. The issue is not discomfort. I promise you, high school students have uncomfortable conversations all the time. And honestly, these days they have those uncomfortable conversations in public on social media. Conservatives just act like being cis, straight, white, and Christian is and should be the default setting. And if anyone is threatening that particular hierarchy, those are the people who need to be corrected. And look at what one student said in a different article, also in the Sacramento Bee. She did not attend that meeting, but she heard about it. Look at what this student said later on. Senior Rebecca Warner, who identifies as a lesbian, did not attend the meeting, but was approached by one student leaving the meeting who made a hurtful comment about her sexuality. One student told me they learned that God was working on me because I've endured trauma causing me to become gay, she said. Taken aback by what I had been told, I listened to the full audio of the meeting and was hurt by what had been said. And then later on in this article, now Warner and two friends, who both asked to remain anonymous due to concerns about their safety on campus, are petitioning the school to remove the club. They said that Andreatta's rhetoric was inflammatory enough to embolden students to say racist or homophobic things. And I'll tell you what, even though it's legal for conservatives to have their clubs on campus and for Bible clubs to be on a high school campus, schools can have rules that say if you are promoting hate, if you are creating this nasty environment for other students, like there are secular across the board reasons a school can revoke that sort of club from existing. And that's what these students are going after. Not because they disagree, but because literally right after that meeting ended, this student had to listen to a classmate tell her that she's gay because of trauma she endured, which is a lie that was brought about by that speaker. So, like, look, if you disparage people of color and LGBTQ people, even in a calm voice, which is a thing Charlie Kirk did over and over, does it cross the line at a public school, or is that just a consequence of allowing a public forum? I mean, that's a legal question as much as it is a philosophical one. Like, just because you don't require members of your club to put on a white hood doesn't mean they're not promoting racism. But actually, I do want to show you one other thing that one student said in that article. Check this out. This is from Warner as well. I have complete respect for their political ideologies, Warner said. I wish that they would have respect for my identity and for my existence. Well said. Well said. Now, during a school board meeting that happened this week, I said there was a lot of discussion about this club, and a lot of people spoke up against what was happening there. A lot of intelligent voices called out her bigotry. They condemned the board for their complicity and hypocrisy. And by the way, Andreatta was at this meeting, but look at what this one person said, which I really appreciated. This is from a parent first. 2 months ago, I listened to you, talking to the school board, cut an ethnic studies class that hundreds of students had already signed up for, that you paid $60,000 in curriculum for, said Jessica Martinez. You took it off because members of the community who said, I can see some of them here right now, said it was divisive. So surely you can disband a club that is equally as divisive for free. Well said. And this is another one from a former district valedictorian, Quest Rhodes, badass name. Holly Andreatta should not devalue civil rights efforts and spread homophobic rhetoric to students. Devaluing civil rights efforts by MLK Jr. is a slap in the face to every student in the school district. It sends a horrible message that nonviolent protest and standing up for your rights is inherently meaningless and will not enact social change. It dehumanizes and belittles those who fought for equal protections and treatment under the law. Damn, you can see why that student was valedictorian. So the school board, for what it's worth, they said the future of the right-wing club, it's not going to be affected by those speeches or a petition to disband the club that a bunch of people have already signed. It would be up to lawyers to figure out if it's violating state or federal law, which is a nice way of saying, yeah, they're not going to disband this club. It's not worth it. But for what it's worth, I found this interesting. Andreatta has now gotten a lot of pushback over the past few days for the things she said. And she issued a public statement. Check out this Facebook post she made here. She made this post. Here's a letter. You can all read it for yourself. But then, if you scroll down here, she reposted the entire letter, statement regarding my appearance at 12 Bridges High School. And I just want to highlight a couple things here because this goes on for a while. Let me see if I could. There we go. I repeatedly clarified that I was not giving my own personal views, but rather responding to questions about what Mr. Kirk has publicly stated, while encouraging students to seek full context and make up their own minds. Dude, we listened to the videos. You were not always quoting Charlie Kirk. You were very much telling us what you thought. So that's a lie right there. Look at this. I want to publicly apologize to my daughter, not anyone else, to my daughter. Her story is hers alone, and I should not have shared personal details about her trauma. She is an accomplished woman with a beautiful family who happens to be gay. You know it hurt her to write that. In my effort to share a vulnerable example of love and acceptance, I shared too much, and that caused her pain. I have apologized to her privately, and I apologize to her publicly. I am deeply proud of her, and we love each other very much, even though she happens to be gay. And then, to be absolutely clear, I did not say that trauma causes homosexuality. I never said that, nor would I ever say that or think that. I was referring to a very specific personal experience, not making a general statement about anyone's life. Any suggestion otherwise is false. Honey, we saw the video. We saw the video. She literally said, I am quoting, something really terrible happened to my daughter when she was very young that I would hope would never happen to any other child. And as a result of it, she's a lesbian. Unquote. Like, okay, she didn't say trauma in general causes homosexuality, but she said a specific kind of trauma experienced by her daughter caused her daughter's homosexuality. That is not the flex you think it is, because you're wrong, no matter how you want to spin that. And can you just imagine how that daughter must have seen and heard about this speech in the news somewhere, and she calls up mom. Mom calls the family. She's like, put my granddaughter on FaceTime. And the daughter picks up the phone and she's like, let's talk about the shit you said at that high school. That has to be what happened, right? That has to be it. The best part about this Facebook message, though, is toward the end right over here. Until now, no one has ever accused me of being racist, homophobic, or hateful, because that is not who I am. Like, maybe no one has called you that because no one was dumb enough to give you enough rope, which you took, right? Like, no one gave you a mic and just said, talk to us for half an hour and let's see what happens. And now that she did, it turns out when you hand the worst people a platform, they often say racist, homophobic, hateful things. Just look for comedians who have podcasts. Once they know, I can just say whatever I want, like the asymptote is always toward like the most racist, sexist, homophobic thing you could say. And in this case, we have video proof of her doing this. If she doesn't like being called a racist or a homophobe, here's a thought: stop having racist and homophobic beliefs. And if any of her statements are out of context, you know what? She can always release a video explaining why there's nothing wrong with being gay or trans, or why she does support diversity initiatives, or why atheism should be treated no differently from any other religion under the law, and why church-state separation is the foundation of our country. Guess what? She hasn't released that video yet. So what exactly was taken out of context? She won't do that because the views she has are despicable and they deserve to be condemned by her entire community. Like, I hope she is voted out of office at the next chance everyone gets. And then guess what? She would have complete freedom to say whatever bigoted thoughts come to mind. And she could do it on a podcast by herself. She could do it in a church pulpit if she goes to a church where people like her are allowed to have any sort of authority. One other thing. In the long 30-minute speech she made to this high school group, apparently in that video, and I did not see this in the clip posted by the Sacramento Bee, she apparently told the students that her daughter was a fan of Charlie Kirk. And on Monday of this week, after she released that long Facebook statement over the weekend, she released a separate video because apparently her daughter called her up about that one too. And she needed to clarify, you guys, I don't think my lesbian daughter is a fan of Charlie Kirk. And I want to show you this clip because it made me laugh.
Yesterday, I released a written statement in response to the video put out by the Sacramento Bee after my presentation at 12 Bridges High School Club America. And in that written statement, I issued an apology to my daughter for speaking about her story and telling her information that wasn't mine to tell. But there was another comment that I need to clarify for her safety and for her well-being. I had said that she loves Charlie Kirk, and that was a mischaracterization. The violence of his death was jarring, and it made an impact just like it did on millions of people around the world. But it was wrong for me to say that she loved him or that she was a true fan, because that's not the case. So I wanted to clarify that and set the record straight on that.
Yeah, not surprising. How much else does this woman not know about what her daughter thinks? Because it sounds like she really has no clue what other people think about her. And I'm so glad some enterprising student took video of her speech to that high school club, but I would love to see the FaceTime video of the daughter calling this mother up if that existed. Like, look, what she refuses to acknowledge in her comments to students and her clarifying statement on Facebook and that clarifying video in response to that clarifying statement on Facebook is that her beliefs are the problem. It's not people quoting them out of context. It's that they were dumb to begin with. She wasn't taken out of context. She was quoted accurately, and only now are other people finding out who she's always been. And much like Charlie Kirk, she is not engaging in good faith debate. She is just repeating a bunch of right-wing talking points that launder prejudice through like respectable rhetoric. Like, that strategy doesn't make what you're saying any better. It just shields how cruel and ignorant you are. That's why pushback matters. That's why I'm so glad someone took video of that speech. That's why we need more students pushing back against everything clubs like this stand for, not by shutting it down. I'm not saying they need to be canceled or silenced or anything like that, but by letting the student body know that conservative bigotry is going to be condemned in their community, and that the victims of Republican ideology have allies everywhere. That's what we need more of right now. You know who's brave? It's not the white boy who started this club. It's the students who are victims of what that club is going to do. And yet they showed up to the meeting to ask questions of this woman and call her out. And the ones who are speaking to the press about what this club is doing to them, and the ones who are signing this petition with their names. That's courage right there. Like, those students and the adults who are defending those students, they show us that moral authority doesn't come from elected office or some title or people who pretend they love, but they actually don't. It comes from people who are willing to stand up for these principles that they believe in, and they're willing to do it against people in positions of power. That's courageous. That's intellectually honest. And what Andreatta stands for are threats to pluralism and equality and basic human decency. Same with Kirk, same with his conservative allies. And the backlash against the things they believe, that's not cancel culture or people being uncomfortable with tough discussions. That's just a community that refuses to accept that brand of hate, and they don't want to see it get normalized. Like, that's the hope. The future isn't with haters like her, but with protesters like pretty much everyone else in this story. And she, Andreatta, has no political future if the people she is willing to cast off, liberal students, queer kids, people of color, atheists, all of their allies, as long as they refuse to accept being treated as problems, she will not have a political future, because they will organize and make sure she doesn't get elected again. They knew what was at stake with that video. They are not going to let her comments be the final word on this issue. So, everyone except her in this story is the hero. I will stop there for now. What questions we got with that one? Oh, thanks for becoming a YouTube member. I appreciate that. D20. That mayor has the absolute worst and sadly expected takes. Wow. Yeah. Yep. Yes, she does. And now she's running to be county supervisor. And that's like her campaign page is vote for me. I'm awesome. I'm not a hateful person. Never said someone was that. I'm not a hateful person. No one who's not hateful ever says that. I don't know if I got that right, but thank you for that donation. I work in the airline industry. Nobody is lowering standards for anybody. DEI is a method of finding more qualified applicants in places not used before. I fully agree with that. That's what I didn't get. Like, if you don't have a lot of Black people who are willing to be pilots or who are getting trained to become pilots, and you don't have a lot of women who are willing to do it, there are ways to fix that. You could go to the spaces where they are in and then ask them what's stopping you from coming in. Figure out what the barrier is. United seemed to find out the barrier was the financial aspect. So they said, guess what? We got your tuition covered. If that's out of the way, are you willing to come here? And it looked like they had people willing to do it. So they figured, is that DEI? No, that's just a company getting smarter about where to find talent. You don't just get it at the traditional places. Like, this is what I appreciate. Like, when you step outside your own bubble and you're willing to look at places that are underserved, you can find a lot of talent. And the fact that we don't look there doesn't mean it's like DEI to start looking there. So this, I mean, all the conservatives who are mad about affirmative action and DEI, this is the sort of thing they're railing against, but there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't put anyone down. It removes a barrier that prevented people from even being considered in the first place, but they all still have to meet the requirements. You think United, a major airline, would be dumb enough to say, yeah, we are allowing pilots who don't know what they're doing? Like, that's not a story that's going to end well. You want pilots like Sully all the time for everything. And that means training them as much as you can. And if you can get a bigger pool of applicants, that is good for your company in the long term. I don't know why that's so hard for conservatives to understand. My metric for hateful language is not how the tone of voice is used. It is the content. Yeah. I mean, I love Right Wing Watch, the website, and the thing they do better than anybody is they just let the quotes speak for themselves. And on social media, Aaron Rupar, Asin on Twitter, and Ron Filipowski, they get really good feedback and shareable things. Why? Because they just show you the clips. They don't even bother offering commentary. They're like, here, let Trump speak for itself. If you saw Trump's stupid 20-minute primetime address this week, I heard from a lot of Democrats who said, you know what? I support Trump giving these types of speeches all week, every week, as long as he wants, because this is not what the newspapers are showing you. Let people see for themselves how deranged he is, and maybe that'll finally get through to them instead of hearing some sanitized version from mainstream media outlets. They define themselves as irrational, therefore prone to hate. I'm sorry, I'm missing the context of this one. So I'm going to skip this one. Can I get a link to the full video? I want to dissect this shit line by line. I will tell you, at first glance, I did not find the 30-minute video. I found the 6-minute version that was on the Sacramento Bee's website. I kind of want to see the full video now too, though I'm not worried I'm going to hear anything that negates anything I said. I just feel it's going to be boring, because if you're giving a 30-minute talk and there's only like 5 minutes worth of stuff anyone needs to see, what are you doing the rest of it? That just sounds boring. Don't do that. That's divisive. Translation: I disagree and feel entitled to silencing you. Yes, the conservative motto right there. Right? I think it's good for kids to meet these people. That's the point I'm trying to make earlier. Like, yeah, go watch these people. Let them speak for themselves. Sometimes when you just let conservatives share their views in front of a mass audience, it turns out they have no idea how dumb their ideas really are, because they always get applause for it in church. But when they speak outside their bubble, it turns out what they're saying is insane. Do you remember, what was it, like 2012? That Senate candidate in Missouri said something like, if it's a legitimate rape, then you're not going to get pregnant. And you could, the way he said it, it seems like something he has said and heard so many times before. Todd Aiken was his name. But when he said it in front of like a newspaper reporter and people heard it, it's like, what the hell did you just say? And it sank his entire campaign. Like, it's good. We should hear these people. Let's hear how deranged they are. Should we start saying, I care about you, even though you are Christian? You know, this goes back to, if we treated conservative Christians the way they treat the rest of us, they could not handle it. Because, you know, if you ever said something like this, they would be so offended. And they would never have any clue that it's exactly what they say, just flipped. All right, I'm jumping to a different story. Give me a minute here. All right. We need to talk about the chaplain corps in the military, specifically the Army, because this week, apparently having fixed all the other problems in the military, Defense Secretary or War Secretary, or the guy who claims he's no longer an alcoholic, Pete Hegseth, he decided to go after chaplains in the military. And at first glance, I'm like, that sounds great because they have their problems. But no, he's worried that the chaplains in the military are too woke, so he's going to fix it. And to make sense, I'm going to show you a video of what Hegseth said. But to make sense of what he's doing, I need to share with you 3 things that you got to know to make sense of all this. The first is that back in August of this year, the Army did this. They released a spiritual fitness guide to help soldiers strengthen their will to fight. And this is actually not a new thing. Basically, the Army released an updated 112-page spiritual fitness guide, which is meant to help soldiers develop a sense of purpose and mental resilience. The guidebook, the spiritual fitness guidebook, it doesn't directly promote Christianity, but it works off of the faulty premise that religion is inherently good because it gives people inner strength. And that's obviously not true. It can for some people, but the rest of us find inner strength outside of organized religion or belief in the supernatural. In fact, in 2011, when the Army surveyed members to assess their spiritual health, atheists actually argued in 2011 that it was unfair to imply they were unfit just because they weren't religious. They had meaning and purpose to their lives, they said, even if that didn't arise from religious faith. Unfortunately, their criticism didn't really go anywhere because the Army still treats faith as a virtue. And this guide, the spiritual fitness guide, acts like spiritual strength is as important as physical and mental strength. And this is what the article in Stars and Stripes, the military outlet, said. Major General William Green Jr., Chief of Chaplains for the Army, said the service must be equipped to lead service members to success in both war and life. The guide provides field-tested advice for navigating the uncertainties that may come with future large-scale operations, he said. These pages are not just a culmination of shared experience. They highlight the remarkable operational effectiveness of spiritual strength, Green wrote in the guide. And look, I have my, like I just said, I have my issues with the chaplaincy arguing that religion is a virtue, at least in principle. But I get what he's saying. I don't really have a problem with that. I'm not denying that spirituality can provide inner strength and peace for certain people, but it's by no means the only way to achieve that. And if there's any consolation to what I'm saying, it's that the updated guide actually suggested exactly what I'm saying here. Look at this. This is in the guidebook right here. From an operational perspective, the soldier's source of strength fuels their purpose and will to fight. For some, the centerpiece may be God, family, community, or patriotism. For others, it may stem from a desire for personal growth, integrity, or the bonds formed with fellow soldiers in shared experiences. You know what? That sounds pretty damn humanistic right at the end there. And I am fine with this paragraph because this is what atheists have been arguing the military chaplaincy ought to be saying to everybody. Yeah, if God does it for you, that's fine. But it doesn't do it for everybody. And the military should be able to reach out to those people as well. So that's the spiritual fitness guide that they just released this time around. I wish the entire manual looked more like that one paragraph. But whatever, that's the guide for you. It's hardly the biggest problem in the military, but that is indicative of how the US military treats religion. Green, the chief of chaplains in the Army, said that this is the effectiveness of spiritual strength. Okay, second thing I got to tell you to make sense of what Hegseth just did. The second thing you got to know is that the chaplain corps, all the chaplains in the US military, they exclude, by definition, humanists and atheists, even if they have all the necessary qualifications. Like the military has a diverse coalition of chaplains who are meant to provide spiritual nourishment for soldiers who seek them out. But those chaplains are, according to the Secular Coalition for America, not that long, I want to show you this. This is what the Secular Coalition for America says on their website regarding the chaplain corps. Humanist chaplains are trained and ready to serve, but the armed forces continues to ignore the needs of non-theists in uniform. Because guess what? There are atheists in foxholes. Meanwhile, the 5,000 chaplains serving in the chaplain corps are not adequately trained to ensure that non-theist service members are receiving the support they need. And that is an important point. Like, plenty of humanists have chaplain credentials that are very difficult to acquire, just like the religious people in those positions. But the military says if you got your endorsement from a humanist group, as opposed to like a Baptist church, you don't get to become a chaplain. There have been lawsuits over this. People have been fighting for this for a while. They've never fixed it. In fact, in 2013, you know how every year the House of Representatives passes like a must-pass defense bill? I think they just did it this week, and it's like $1 trillion. But in 2013, one Democrat even offered an amendment. Look at this. The amendment says this: the Secretary of Defense shall provide for the appointment as officers in the chaplain corps of the armed forces of persons who are certified or ordained by non-theistic organizations and institutions such as humanist, ethical, culturalist, or atheist. Basically saying if they are non-theistic groups, atheist, humanist groups, who have the same sort of qualifications to make someone a chaplain, they have to go through rigorous training, etc., then you should also take them. And that amendment was not accepted. It was never adopted. In fact, when that was even being discussed, I had to go back for this one. In 2013, when that amendment was even being discussed, look at what one Republican said as to why we could not have atheist or humanist chaplains in the military. They don't believe anything, said Representative Mike Conaway of Texas. I can't imagine an atheist accompanying a notification team as they go into some family's home to let them have the worst news of their life. And this guy says, you know, that's it. Your son's just worms. I mean, worm food. This Republican thought an atheist chaplain would go to some family member's house to tell them their son is dead and say, well, I guess he's worm food now. Like, no, we don't lack that compassion. That's a Republican problem. But that is a very real thing that happened 12 years ago. So that's the second thing. The military doesn't even allow non-theistic chaplains. Third thing I need to tell you is that over the past decade, since that debacle really took center stage, the military as a whole has tried to be a little more welcoming to people outside traditional religions. And one of the way they've tried to do this is they have allowed soldiers to accurately describe their beliefs. Okay? Before 2014, there were only a limited number of ways you could define your religious identity. There were a number of faith codes you could use to describe yourself. What was on that list? Muslim, Hindu, Wiccan, Jewish, Buddhist, sure. Or you could choose from like 100 different Christian denominations. But what happens if you're non-religious? Your options were atheist or no religious preference, which is so limiting. Like, I would mark down atheist, but there are people who are humanists, who are deists, who are like whatever term they want to use, but they would argue atheist is one answer to one question. But if you want to ask me what I believe, I am so much more than that. And I think there is a more accurate way to describe what my religious label is, even if it's non-religious. And so here's the thing. After 2014, the list was expanded. And this was an amazing thing. This is, again, 2014. Let me show you this press release from the ACLU. Army humanists no longer invisible. And this is written by a soldier who said, this week, however, humanist will become an officially approved faith code. And I will finally be able to accurately identify my belief preferences on my official records. Second paragraph we've already discussed here. Until this week, we could choose between atheist or no religious preference. These codes do not reflect my actual identity as a humanist. So that was a big deal. That was a big deal for the military to do. And guess what? In 2017, they did it again. They expanded the list one more time. And check this out. This is from the American Humanist Association, which had been fighting for this. The military chaplaincy recommended changes also removed the more generic no religious preference and not applicable option in favor of more specific statements that say more about the viewpoints various non-theists actually hold, with additions like deist, no religion, humanist, no response, and others. So that is a wonderful thing. In fact, I will even click on their actual memorandum here, and you could see in this memorandum, they said, okay, we have, why are we doing this? So we can accurately track more faith and belief systems, providing more accurate demographic data for religious groups. We can enable better planning for religious support to the force and provide a better assessment of the capabilities and requirements. And you could see on this list that they have attached here, look at all the options you could choose from now for your faith group. Yes, there's a lot of variations of Christianity, but look at AH, heathen. That's a new one on the list. If you scroll down quite a way, we got other religions right up. BV is other religions. If I keep scrolling down here, some of these I've never even heard of, but apparently they are things. Druid, deism. Interesting. And I'm going to get down to the end here. These are the interesting ones. Pagan, humanist. You got some traditional ones down here. And then at the end, NO, no religious preference, has been removed. So, very interesting stuff. This is the new list. You could see right up here, that's the date these were added, March 31st, 2017. So you're Protestant, no denominational preference. That was removed that day. But what else? What did we add? No preference, no religion, none provided. So again, why are they doing this? Why did they do this in 2017? Because accuracy matters. Also, I will say, besides just getting accuracy, if you belong to one of these groups, it gives you, if you're part of a humanist, if you're a humanist in the military and you say you're a humanist, you can actually put in requests that you want to gather with your humanist colleagues, just like your Christian buddies can do. But if you're an atheist, they didn't allow for that. So these labels matter. Accuracy matters. So here's where we are at right now. The military has always treated faith like it's a net positive for good soldiers, but the language they've used has become less explicitly Christian over time. So that's nice. At the same time, they have become more open to diversity of thought, and they acknowledge, like, yeah, we're in an increasingly non-religious country. We have to expand and provide more services to people outside traditional Christian beliefs. Now, Pete Hegseth sees all this, and he's like, nope, too woke. I don't like any of it. And Hegseth, of course, is a Christian nationalist who wants to turn the military into like crusaders for Christ. This week, he posted a video on social media saying he was going to overhaul the entire chaplain corps because they're not religious enough for his liking. Specifically, he went after the spiritual fitness guide, and he also went after that list of faiths I just showed you because he doesn't like all the diversity that's on there. I'm going to show you a clip from his video. It's not the full video, but it's a long clip. But I want you to see exactly what he says. There are no edits here. I'm just showing you the center of his video.
For about 200 years, the Chaplain Corps continued its role as the spiritual leader of our service members, serving our men and women in times of hardship and ministering to their souls. But sadly, as part of the ongoing war on warriors, in recent decades, its role has been degraded. In an atmosphere of political correctness and secular humanism, chaplains have been minimized, viewed by many as therapists instead of ministers. Faith and virtue were traded for self-help and self-care. If you need proof, just look at the current Army Spiritual Fitness Guide. In well over 100 pages, it mentions God one time. That's it. It mentions feelings 11 times. It even mentions playfulness, whatever that is, 9 times. There's zero mention of virtue. The guide relies on New Age notions, saying that the soldier's spirit consists of consciousness, creativity, and connection. The guide itself reports that around 82% of the military are religious, yet ironically it alienates our warfighters of faith by pushing secular humanism. In short, it's unacceptable and unserious, so we're tossing it. I have a directive right here that I will sign today to eliminate the use of the Army Spiritual Fitness Guide effective immediately. These types of training materials have no place in the War Department. Our chaplains are chaplains, not emotional support officers, and we're going to treat them as such. That's why today at my direction, we are also simplifying the faith and belief coding system. In recent years, it ballooned to over 200 overly complex faith and belief codes. An overwhelming majority of the military population only uses 6 codes. 11 are not used by anyone. So we're going to streamline it and move it to a new list of religious affiliation codes so that our chaplains can actually use it to minister better to the flock.
As a commenter said, you could smell the whiskey breath from here. That video is ridiculous. I mean, to say that the role of chaplains has been degraded because of secular humanism is ridiculous, because secular humanists aren't even allowed to become military chaplains. It is a lie to claim that chaplains cannot do their jobs properly, because they've always had plenty of leeway to meet soldiers where they are at. If someone is super conservative and religious and a chaplain is the same way, they can talk about that. But in theory, a good chaplain can meet with someone who is of a different faith from them and also help those people, meeting them where they are. So they're not prevented from talking about God. I don't know what the problem is. Hegseth makes it sound like the Spiritual Fitness Guide, which, by the way, you know nobody's going to read, but he makes it sound like the Spiritual Fitness Guide ties the hands of religious chaplains from doing what they think is best. There is no evidence that is going on whatsoever. And then he did like a Control F, looking for random words, like God only appears once. Who cares? It's the Chaplain Spiritual Fitness Guide. I promise you, God's all over that thing. But one of the things he called out, he's like, I found the word playfulness 9 times, but like he never offered any context into how those words were used. So I looked it up. You want to know what the Spiritual Fitness Guide says about playfulness? Here's the section on playfulness. And this is all about, I want to go back up here for a second. They are talking about creativity and what chaplains can do here. But look at this. Playfulness as a component of creativity embodies the spirit of exploration and joy in overcoming challenges. In a military context, playfulness is essential for soldiers as it allows them to engage in training and problem solving in a way that feels less rigid and more dynamic. It also gives them a space to relax and enjoy life. When soldiers embrace playfulness, they not only enhance their creativity, but also solidify their understanding of life through positive experiences. And then there are examples of that. What the hell is the problem with any of that? They are not saying, you know what soldiers ought to do? They should go for recess and play on the swings. You know that's what Pete Hegseth thinks that's all about. No, the military saying, thinking out of the box and giving them things to do that let them expand their minds, that's going to serve us well in the military, which is almost certainly true. I believe that, right? That is not woke. So while we're at it, Pete Hegseth also said, like, there's a section of consciousness, creativity, and connection. And he said that was basically New Age bullshit. And I have no problem getting rid of New Age bullshit, but it's not. When the Spiritual Fitness Guide talks about consciousness and creativity and connection, that's just a quick alliterative way of describing personality traits that these chaplains are saying make for good soldiers. Specifically, the manual says good soldiers are aware of and able to evaluate one's thoughts, feelings, and surroundings. That's consciousness. It says good soldiers are able to generate novel ideas, approaches, and solutions that reflect individual expression and innovative thinking. That's creativity. And they are capable, good soldiers are capable of building bridges with the people around them. And that's connection. That's it. That's what the 3 C's are all about. But Hegseth, knowing full well that MAGA loyalists cannot read, he just wants to do away with all of that. There is a writer for an outlet called Baptist News. His name is Rick Pidcock, and he does wonderful work. But one of the things he wrote in there, and I wanted to share this with you here, apparently, Hegseth doesn't think soldiers need to be aware of and able to evaluate their surroundings. He also doesn't seem to think soldiers need to be healed, because healing and awareness equate to secular humanism in his mind. Fair point. I mean, Hegseth doesn't understand what the military is doing, but he thinks he knows better than the people who do this all the time. And then he says, what does Hegseth think these thousands of military chaplains are doing then? As usual, he seems to think they are all woke. The other thing that Pidcock said here that I want to share with you, what Hegseth seems to ignore is that the U.S. military already has a robust chaplaincy program that serves the needs of service members of all faiths or no faith. Not really to no faith, but okay. Evangelical groups such as the Southern Baptist Convention are significantly represented in that corps. And that is true. Like, certain religious Christian denominations are overrepresented in the chaplaincy. That is not the case for non-religious chaplains, because they're not allowed in the corps. One of the other things Hegseth said in that video is that 82% of the military is religious, which makes you wonder, okay, well, what about the other 18%? Do they deserve anything here? Should they get support as well? But then he falsely claimed that those 82% are being alienated because of some non-existent push towards secular humanism that just isn't there. I don't know what he's talking about. Hegseth said he's going to streamline that list of military religious affiliation codes. And he said that would help it would help chaplains minister better to the flock. How? How would having less specific information help anybody? If anything, that's only going to make their jobs harder. Like, Republicans want to eliminate an expansion of religious codes that took over a decade for them to approve in the first place because apparently they can't handle complexity of thought. As if, like, if you have one code that just says Christian, we should be good, right? Because Christians are all basically the same. And of course, Christians who are practicing believers will tell you, no, like, Methodists are different from Lutherans. White evangelicals are different from mainline Protestants who go to an African American church. You know what I mean? We get that when it comes to Christianity, even if Hegseth doesn't. But what Hegseth doesn't understand is that even in other religious faiths and even among non-religious people, labels matter and they are more defining of who you are depending on what you use. I use the word atheist. Other people use different words. I don't care what you use. But Hegseth is like, we don't need that much. Why make it easier for people to identify themselves? It is just stupidity for the sake of it. Hegseth doesn't understand the military. He doesn't understand military culture. He refuses to listen to the people who have devoted their lives to the military. So his only solution to everything is, let me destroy what you have helped to create. The smart thing to do here would be, let me defer to the experts in this subject, which would be the Chaplain Corps. And he's not doing that either. He's like, I'm smarter than all of you. Like, it's this unearned arrogance that defines everything that's wrong with this Republican administration. Now, in response to Hegseth's video, the American Humanist Association, which has been battling a lot of these issues I've been talking about with the military, this is what they said as a response to all this. Hegseth's broadside against the Army Spiritual Fitness Guide, including putting scare quotes around faith traditions he doesn't recognize or value, is an attack against any member of the military who doesn't practice his form of conservative Christianity. Hegseth tries to hide this by attacking secular humanism, but the irony is that despite the fact that certified humanist chaplains serve Americans every day in hospitals, prisons, and college campuses across the country, they're not allowed to serve in the military. Every single member of our military, regardless of their religious beliefs, deserves access to a chaplain who will support their well-being. It is clear Hegseth doesn't understand what this means because his directive stands in direct contradiction to the standards of practice for professional chaplains agreed to by all credentialing bodies for chaplains. Those standards include a recognition that chaplaincy does involve emotional care and emphasizes providing care for diverse beliefs, not mocking them. Those standards are agreed to and followed by all practicing chaplains, Christians, Jews, Muslims, and yes, even secular humanists. And the Army Spiritual Fitness Guide, based on those standards, has been endorsed by leaders in the Army Chaplain Corps who are practicing Christians. The truth is that Hegseth doesn't care about strengthening the practice of chaplaincy or the spiritual well-being of the military. He wants to do what he's always done, treat his position as a pulpit and push his deeply conservative Christian nationalist beliefs onto the troops. Listen, I read a lot of press releases from the American Humanist Association. They're almost never that in your face about anything. And it is interesting because I'm pretty sure they have a lot of nits to pick with the Chaplain Corps and the Spiritual Fitness Guide. And even now they're like, the guide is not the problem here. So all of this is happening, by the way, the same week that Pete Hegseth hosted at the Pentagon a Christmas worship service that featured evangelist and hate preacher Franklin Graham saying that, yeah, God loves, but God also hates. And also that his God is a God of war. His words. Like, nothing Hegseth wants to do here is going to make the military better. It'll just make it worse for the people he doesn't believe ought to be there in the first place because they're not sufficiently Christian warriors. And he's throwing a temper tantrum because what's the alternative? Taking accountability for the murders he's doing in the Caribbean? Like, nothing he's whining about was breaking the military. It was not weakening readiness. It was not silencing faith. The Chaplain Corps was functioning as it was always designed to function, in a pluralistic force. They provide care across belief systems. They respect people's consciences. And they acknowledge that meaning and resilience and moral grounding may not just come from God for a lot of people. And by the way, they still don't do enough to help secular humanists for real. But again, not the issue here today. All the small steps they took to make the chaplain corps a little less exclusive, like by expanding who they were catering to, that didn't erase religion. It just stopped privileging one kind of religion at the expense of everyone else. So Hegset's intervention will solve nothing because there's no problem that exists that he's actually looking to fix. He's just tearing down years of careful evidence-based adaptation because he likes ideological purity tests. I don't know what the point of this is. I don't know why he's doing it. I don't know why anyone would want to join a military that doesn't give a shit about who they are. Like Hegseth wants people to enlist so they'll join his religious crusade, but that's not why people sign up. And it violates the nature, the secular nature of our military. And that makes us weaker. And you would think Republicans would care about the military. And yet here you have the leader of the Department of Defense, or whatever he wants to call it today, just saying, whatever, I'm smarter than everyone in the military. Why should I listen to them? I don't know why more Republicans aren't mad about this. I'll stop there for now. What questions we got here? Thanks for that donation. I still don't think spirituality even has a coherent definition. No kidding. Make it whatever you want. It's believing in something, whatever. Dumb question, perhaps. What is humanism exactly? I've heard this term before, but I'm not very familiar with moral philosophy. I mean, the simplest definition I could give you, and I'm sure secular humanists might disagree, atheism is, I don't believe in a God. Humanism is, okay, but let me tell you what I do believe. And the American Humanist Association, just as the largest group in the US, they have their list of this is what humanists believe. And I think most of that stuff is pretty non-controversial. This is the only life we have. We got to make the most of it. We got to help other people, things like that. But again, your definition may vary. And that's why having different titles, having different labels we use is an important thing because it more accurately describes where you're coming from. Do they include Satanist as in actually worshiping Satan? You know what? I don't think they do. I don't think that one is on the list. A quick scan shows me the answer is no. That's funny. You can list as a Jehovah's Witness because if they found out you were active military, the Jehovah's Witnesses would kick you out of the religion. That is a very, very interesting point. But, there might be people who are ex-JWs but still identify as such. I don't know. I don't disagree that there are probably a lot of labels that just don't get used very much. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have them. Like, why would you get rid of it? Why do they always find it so offensive that not everyone wants to believe what they do? Because I think it means admitting that they might be wrong about something and they can't handle that. Which is weird because I am constantly surrounded in my real life by people who always tell me I'm wrong about everything. And yet, if you're Republican, you can't handle even a bit of criticism. They can't even take a picture of you, apparently, for Vanity Fair without you flipping out about how it makes you look bad, even though it's like just a straight up image of you. All right, jump into another story here. All right. Yeah, here we go. I actually have some good news when it comes to the Department of Defense or War or whatever we're calling it. And it's not a huge story, but this is an interesting one. So one of the things the United States government does is we have this thing called the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And you can see the mission statement right here. Our mission is to advance international freedom of religion or belief by independently assessing and unflinchingly confronting threats to this fundamental right. And that sounds really interesting. Like the United States believes democracy, in theory, The US believes democracy is good. So when we go out to other countries to work with them, to trade with them, to negotiate with them, one of the things we could say is, if you need something from us, we are holding you to democratic standards. We want you to have open and fair and free elections. When you have a government that actually is competent, that's one of the things you could do. But also, we believe in religious freedom. We are not a theocracy. We'll see if that lasts, but we're not a theocracy. And so when you negotiate with like theocratic countries in other parts of the world, you can say, oh, you need something from us? Well, we want you to make sure you are not holding religious prisoners because they dared to question religious belief or something like that. So the US Commission on International Religious Freedom is a wonderful idea. It's a good thing. I am glad we have that. And the members of this commission, there are like 9 members, and they are appointed by both major parties. The president gets to choose some people. The leader of the House and Senate get to choose some people. And the leaders of the minority parties in both of those chambers get to choose some people for this commission. And that means all the time, there are going to be some wonderful advocates of religious freedom who work for this their entire lives. And, a handful of Christian extremists, because that's who Republicans choose, and they act like government neutrality on the subject of religion, that counts as Christian oppression, right? We talk about those people all the time. But in any case, every commissioner who gets appointed to this group, they're appointed for a 2-year term, and they may be eligible for a second 2-year term, and that's it. So the group's main purpose, as I told you, is to weigh in on religious freedom and make policy recommendations to sitting lawmakers. So, like, even those right-wing members of the USCIRF, even the right-wing members tend to sound normal when they are part of this commission, maybe because they're not speaking on behalf of themselves. They're speaking on behalf of their entire commission and that entire organization. Like, it's not a platform for you to advance your personal views. That's not what this is about. One of the biggest things the USC IRF does is they put out a annual report with places of particular concern. And this is always a fascinating report every year, but this is their one from 2025. And you could just see this world map. And specifically, this is like page 1, but it says these are the nations of particular concern because they are theocracies where if you question religion in North Korea, in Nigeria, in China, if you go against what they want you to believe, what the government wants you to believe, you could be in grave danger. That's why those countries are in red. There are some countries that are heading in that direction, and there are some places that are just particularly concerning because they may very well just kill you. So why do they put out this report? Because guess what? If we are negotiating with Turkey or Syria or Sri Lanka, maybe this is one of the things we can hold over them saying, oh, you need something from us. We want to see you do better on the subject of religious freedom. So how are you going to prove to us that you're going to have freedom of religion in your country? Like, that is a powerful thing for the US to be able to do around the world. So I do appreciate that they have this organization, and that is a very important thing. Now, I would also say the recommendations influence how the State Department works with those nations. So it's not symbolic. This actually has makes a tangible difference in a very laudable goal of having religious freedom around the world, right? Okay. With that said, the reason I bring all this up is because this right here is Rachel Laser. She is the executive director. She's the president of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Like, her entire life is church-state separation and fighting religious freedom. I use Americans United all the time when I'm talking about lawsuits because they file a bunch of these lawsuits that we've been talking about. I mentioned earlier in Oklahoma where they were trying to pass these Bible-heavy social studies standards, and the Oklahoma Supreme Court just knocked those down. Why did they do it? Because Americans United was one of the groups filing a lawsuit against that. So the organization does wonderful work, and Rachel right here is the head of it. Well, guess what? Recently, Chuck Schumer, in the congressional record, which is like the paperwork no one ever sees, this was filed in there. And just check this out. The chair, on behalf of the president pro tempore, upon the recommendation of the Democratic leader, that's Chuck Schumer, ... appoints the following individual to the USCIRF. Rachel K. Laser of the District of Columbia. So Chuck Schumer just recommended Rachel to join the USCIRF. And that came as a shock to me, because usually when they are recommending people to join this group, it's not that they don't have good people, but they usually choose, like Democrats might choose progressive Christian leaders, maybe a Jewish rabbi somewhere. They don't go to our circles, our being atheist groups, church-state separation groups for things like this. So that came as a shock to me. This is the statement put out by the USCIRF right here. USCIRF welcomes Senator Schumer's appointment of Rachel Laser. And look at this. We welcome Rachel's appointment to the commission, said USCIRF Vice Chair Asif Mahmood. We look forward to her joining the commission and adding her expertise to our work to further secure religious freedom for all abroad. Sounds awesome. I mean, nothing weird about that. That's great. The one thing I wanted to share with you about this, first, I can't believe Chuck Schumer did something that's genuinely good. Who knew he was capable of that at this point? But also, one of the things that is very interesting about the USCIRF is that, I said, Republicans get to nominate people too, and they often choose religious zealots. And yet, the USCIRF has openly gone after anti-Muslim bias. Like, you would think if they're nominating some conservative Christian zealots to this commission, they're not going to care, but they do. The USCIRF has condemned anti-Muslim bigotry. And last year, for example, there was a statement condemning the persecution of atheist and non-practicing individuals in countries where our beliefs put us in jeopardy. And guess what? The USCIRF recommended that the United States sign on to that petition, that statement. And because of their recommendation, our country did sign on to that statement. I mean, symbolic, maybe, but our weight in the world has some effect. So the USCIRF is important. Now, this is interesting. In 2018, Mitch McConnell nominated a hate group leader as his recommendation to this group, Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council. And that nomination, when that was made, it was condemned by so many groups who had seen the harm Tony Perkins has inflicted upon the country. And yet, Tony Perkins, who then became the chair of the USCIRF, Tony Perkins, as far as I could tell, in the 4 years he was on that committee, he never used this platform to spew his bigotry. Like, that's weird to me. I was expecting him to do a lot of bad things. As far as I could tell, he did not. In fact, while he was on that board, on the commission, the USCIRF called for the release of Raif Badawi, who was imprisoned in Saudi Arabia for alleged apostasy in an Islamic nation. So, like, that was with Perkins as the chair, I believe. Another time, more recently, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, he recommended former Representative Vicky Hartzler to the USCIRF. And I made a whole video about this too. But Vicky Hartzler is one of the most rabid anti-LGBTQ people in Congress that Republicans have ever had. She compared same-sex marriage to like a 3-year-old driving a car. She didn't want the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. She said gay soldiers should have to sleep separately from straight ones, to the point where even her own nephew called her out for being a bigot. And yet, even though Vicky Hartzler is the current chair of the USCIRF, guess what happened when Rachel was appointed to this group? Look at this in that same press release I showed you earlier. Look at this. It is important to have as many people in the fight as possible to stand for all those around the world who are suffering violations of their religious freedom, said Vicky Hartzler. I look forward to Rachel Laser working with us as we continue to be a voice for those who suffer at the hands of the worst religious freedom violators. Which, listen, did she write that? I don't know. Maybe it was someone who works there. But again, one of the amazing things about this organization is even though you have conservative Christian zealots, they do not use this group as a platform for their bigotry. So that is important. I have not seen evidence of Vicky Hartzler using this position to hurt anyone else. And I'm really glad now that Rachel will be on that commission where she could provide a check and a voice of reason to this commission that has a couple of people who I wish were not on there. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. I will add that, of course, Americans United was crowing about her appointment there. I did ask Rachel, how did this happen? You like ask Chuck Schumer to make this happen? What's the deal? And she told me she has no idea how she got nominated, but once Chuck Schumer's office asked her if she was interested, she said yes, and that's fantastic. I have also seen a lot of good stuff across the board. This is from the Humanist International, and basically just look at what their people are saying. This is Maggie Ardiente, their president. We are confident she will be a strong voice for both people of faith and the non-religious on the commission. I loved this from Nick Fish, president of American Atheists. I'm just going to skip down here. We both need and deserve far more leaders who, like Rachel, prioritize pluralism and practice tolerance, and far fewer of those who would force their views on others and punish those who dissent, which I took as a backhanded compliment against Vicky Hartzler. And also Fish Stark of the American Humanist Association. Rachel is the exact kind of leader we humanists trust to represent us in the halls of power. She's a proven, tenacious advocate, and we are confident that her perspective will be invaluable in guiding USCIRF's critical work. Love that too. Again, that's just a fantastic news story. I'm still waiting for the USCIRF, for any of these people to nominate the head of an atheist group to this Religious Freedom Commission. Hasn't happened before. Rachel, by the way, in case you're wondering, is Jewish. But again, she's awesome. So like, whatever, that's fine. But I wish some of these political leaders would nominate the leaders of an atheist group, because why isn't our voice at this table? In any case, that's some good news. I just wanted to share that with you. By the way, I'm going to address this. I know you're chatting about it. I know the smoke alarm is going off somewhere. The batteries are on their way. They're not here yet. I will fix it when I can. It will be off soon. I had a dilemma about 5 minutes before I started this live stream where I'm like, should I just like undo it or should I just let it go? And I thought I was isolated enough that it wouldn't be an issue. Turns out it's a total issue and I'll deal with it later. Anyway, what questions we got here? Wait, Schumer did a good? I can't believe it either. He was bound. He was overdue. Bit too late, but does anyone remember Dennis Kucinich and his proposal for a Department of Peace? Oh, he is forgotten, and I'm pretty sure we're better off because of that at this point. I know, trust me. It's annoying me too. It'll be fixed soon. The doors are closed. I can't stop it. I appreciate the donation. All right, I'm going to jump to another story. Give me 1 second. I know we're running late, but there's a couple things I really do want to share with you here. All right, I'm going to jump over here, and you are not going to like any of this. All right. I'm going to tell you a pretty disturbing story, but I promise you it kind of has a happy ending. This is a decision that just came out recently from the New South Wales Supreme Court in Australia. And the short version of this story is that a judge has ordered a man to pay nearly $1.5 million in damages to a daughter whom he abused for many years. But I think the bigger story here is what it says about the Jehovah's Witnesses, because they're at the center of this story. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this as non-disturbingly as possible, but it's going to be hard to avoid. But as the story goes, this daughter, who is anonymous in the court records, she was raised in a family that joined the Jehovah's Witnesses at a congregation when she was about 5 years old. And the Jehovah's Witnesses promote a family dynamic in which the father is the head of the household. Everyone else must be subservient and obedient. And this girl and her siblings, that is what they did. They attended meetings multiple times a week. They avoided people who were not part of their religious community. They never read anything besides approved Jehovah's Witness literature. And her father even became like a lay leader in the local congregation, which gave him even more authority. And then the physical abuse started. And the thing is, according to this girl who goes by, in the court documents, her title is BDS2. But basically, this is what was written in the court records. I'm going to go to number 19 here. The plaintiff described a number of examples of specific incidents of physical violence, including one occasion where the defendant, that's her father, continuously beat her because she could not stop crying, and another where the girl locked herself in the bathroom and the defendant broke down the bathroom door. The plaintiff said her father would beat her if she so much as turned her head towards someone she was forbidden from speaking to, and that he would sometimes punish her for things she had not done. So that's disturbing. Turns out when this girl was 17, her father, there was a 2-week period when the rest of her family was out of town. So it was 2 weeks where she was alone with her father, who was already, as you just saw, abusive. And at this point, the court record gets graphic and disturbing. And so this is going to be disturbing. But again, my choice here is, do I just not share this with you and try to summarize it? Or do I let you see for yourself what this man actually did? I'll share it with you. I'm sorry. Forward, skip ahead if you need to. But like, this is what's written in the court record here. Number 21, not long after her family had left for the expo, the defendant, the dad, called the daughter into his bedroom and asked her to wax the pubic hair on the shaft of his penis. Skip down to 23. The plaintiff says that her dad moved his body closer to her, put his hand under her pajamas onto her breast, and began rubbing and playing with her nipples. The plaintiff says that her dad then began to suck her nipples. The plaintiff says she protested and asked her dad to stop. The dad told her it was okay because he's her father, and said words to the effect of, "Be obedient to your father." Here's another section. The plaintiff described an occasion when her dad gave her alcohol, she's 17, and made her watch pornographic movies with him. The plaintiff says her dad gave her something to drink and told her to drink it. The girl said she began to feel tired, so she told her dad she was going to bed and then left. And we don't know what happened after that. I'm skipping down. The dad recalled another incident during the 2-week period when she caught the dad watching her while she was in the shower. The girl says that she was showering one morning before work. She looked out the window of the bathroom and saw her dad outside staring at her with a smile on his face. I'll keep reading there. The plaintiff says that she told her dad to stop perving at her. I know I'm skipping a lot of this. Here's another one. The dad is then alleged to have said, "I want you to do something else for me. I will give you $300 to help you with your car, and $300 after if you bend over the bed." The girl replied that she did not want to do that and she did not need the money. The plaintiff says that when her family returned home, the dad became obsessed with monitoring her movements and personal interactions. The defendant, the dad, would also tell her family and members of the congregation that this girl was mental, headstrong, rebellious, a nutcase, a troublemaker, and that she served the devil. Yeah, I'm sorry too. But that is what this man did to her. Now, here's what the girl did at this point. Her dad is a regular, not ordained, but a lay leader in the congregation. She reports his behavior to the elders of that congregation, hoping they could put a stop to it. But as soon as dad found out that she had told those elders about it, he turned on her again. Look at this. This is number 40 in this court report. After she reported the abuse, the dad says that the girl says that her dad confronted her in the family home and yelled words to the effect of, "What have you been saying to the elders behind my back?" The girl said that her dad then slapped her across the face so hard that her head and body hit the brick wall behind her. Okay, so then at some point, the elders have a judicial committee hearing. They're going to hear what is being said here. By the way, she has to sit in for this. And the girl said that when she did so, I'm sorry, let me back up a second. At this hearing, the girl said that the elders had her put the allegations of sexual assault to her dad. She had to call him out in real time. The girl said that when she did that, the dad yelled at her, threatened to flog and hit her, and said words to the effect of, "Just wait until I get out of this room." He's doing that in front of the other elders in the congregation. And the girl says that her dad had to be repeatedly told to sit back down by the elders. The plaintiff remembers the defendant telling the elders that the plaintiff had seduced him. Yeah, the 17-year-old girl seduced you. So at this point, they had another meeting, and at this point, the dad, who allegedly had his head in his hands and his elbows on his knees, just sitting like that, said words to the effect of, "Yes, I stepped out of line." So he kind of admits to what all these allegations are all about. And despite all of this, the elders did not believe the girl. Furthermore, they told her she could not go to the police and that if she did that, she would be kicked out. Not just kicked out, because when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you don't just get kicked out. You could get disfellowshipped, which means you are cut off from your family and your social network in that congregation. And remember, these are people who live in a bubble. If they kick you out of the bubble, you have nowhere to go because you don't know other people. So, that was a big deal of a threat. And they would not allow her to speak to them. The elders would not allow this girl to speak to them in private. They always wanted her dad present. And the girl even said her father threatened to kill her if she spoke to the elders alone. And guess what? After she did all of this, none of it made a difference. Her dad was allowed back into the Jehovah's Witness congregation as if nothing had ever happened. Now, that all happened, I believe, in 1989. That's the timeline we are talking about here. All this happened in 1989. It's not until the year 2000 that this woman now reports all this to the Queensland Police Service. I think she had started seeing a therapist and they're like, "You should tell someone about this," or "I'm going to," or something like that. But she did. She told the police about this. And I'm skipping ahead a bit, but in 2013 in Australia, they had a royal commission, basically a government investigation into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. And they interviewed her. They want to hear her story so they can use it to make recommendations about how to prevent abuse moving forward. And she was willing to talk to them. That was in 2013. Now, let me backtrack a bit. In 2000, she told the police this stuff had happened. Well, guess what? The Queensland police took action. Her father was eventually convicted of his crimes in the year 2014. And he actually spent I want to make sure I get this right. I'm sorry, the year is wrong. Her father was convicted of his crimes in 2004, and he spent 3 years in prison as a result. So there is some kind of justice there. But him going to jail for 3 years doesn't negate the fact that this woman has suffered her entire life because of what this man did. And this is something the Supreme Court detailed in their report here. Let me go back to that awful thing, that whole statements that they're making here. Check this out. Yeah, here we go. The plaintiff reported feeling worthless and defeated to this day as a result of the harm caused by her dad's actions. She feels that no matter what she does or what she achieves, she will never be able to escape the effects of the harm caused by her dad. She described the impact on her relationships with her mother, her siblings, and her extended family. She says that she is treated as an outcast by her family. The plaintiff also reported suffering from nightmares and struggling with ongoing anxiety. She rarely forms new friendships, generally has difficulty trusting people. The plaintiff says that she finds it difficult to love and accept herself. She says that she feels dirty and spends a lot of time bathing and scrubbing herself in an effort to feel clean. The plaintiff reports that during her recent treatment for cancer, she opted to have a bilateral mastectomy, removing her breasts, in part out of a hope that removing both breasts would help rid her of the memory of her dad's abuse. The plaintiff says that she spends most days trying to distract herself from thinking about the future so that she does not have to think about how depressing and pointless her efforts have been to erase what her dad did to her. Jesus H. Christ. So this woman is now 52 years old. She actually got her law degree in 2017 and then joined the Queensland Police Service herself, the police she spoke to decades earlier to try to get her dad in jail. But because she was suffering from so much PTSD, it made it really hard for her to stay in that line of work, and she had to retire in 2022. So her career lasted all of like 5 years. She also told the court that the Jehovah's Witnesses had an impact on her life even after she left the church. She got married at 18 to someone who was a part of that JW community, but she said he was also psychologically controlling, demeaning, demoralizing, and objectifying. And when she wanted to get a divorce, the Jehovah's Witnesses would not allow it, but she left him anyway. And the reason all this has ended up in front of that Supreme Court is because now she is seeking compensation for everything she has suffered. And her father represented himself in court and attempted to defend his actions in just the weirdest way. This is going back to this ruling, but look at number 55. The plaintiff, the girl, was cross-examined by her dad. He put to his daughter that he was uncircumcised, contrary to her account of her observations of his penis. He suggested to her that aside from the one occasion when she consented to digital penetration, her allegations of sexual abuse were lies. He further suggested that she was capable of providing services as a victim's rights advocate, which presumably demonstrated that she was capable of employment. He put to her that she was a strong and capable woman. He suggested that she had had dysfunctional and violent relationships with partners after the alleged abuse, which had caused her emotional trauma. Not him, it's the other guys. He suggested to his daughter that he had never physically abused her and that he only smacked her on the bottom and on occasion with a wooden spoon. His big argument here is that you told the court I was circumcised, but I am not. So therefore, everything you said is a lie. And the court's response, I should tell you, jumping ahead, is this girl was underage and she presumably had not seen a man's penis before. It's possible she just didn't know what she was looking at. So I'm just saying, the dad's trying to push his daughter that, I didn't do anything to you. The court did not buy any of that. In fact, he also insisted, the dad insisted, that his daughter's testimony was a gross exaggeration at best. And oh, this is disturbing. So I'll share this with you. I didn't even highlight this one. Um, I'm not. Oh, this is disturbing. He said, I don't know how to explain this because I didn't highlight it, but this woman was going to marry.
NSW Crest.
Oops.
Supreme
I am
Court
trying to
New
stop
South.
that. I don't know why I turned that on. Basically, this girl said she was going to get married, but she wanted to do natural birth control with her future husband. And that involves tracking the changes in your vaginal mucus. And the dad said that my daughter told me she didn't know how to do this. So I told her she had to insert her fingers into her vagina and feel what mucus is there. And then I showed her so she knew what it meant. And that's why she consented to it. Therefore, I didn't do anything abusive. It's disturbing. The dad later said, okay, that was poor judgment on my part. Now, okay, we're done with the disturbing stuff. But here's the part that you will want to hear finally after all of this. Look at what the court said after all of this. I accept the daughter's evidence in its entirety. After all of this, the judges at the Supreme Court are like, everything the daughter said, we believe. And basically everything the dad said, we do not. And at the end of this, I'll scroll down here. They go through a lot of stuff. This is interesting. There were many events that likely impacted this daughter's capacity to earn other than the abuse. The first and perhaps most important is that she was raised in a cult-like environment, which no doubt impacted her psychological state and her future educational and employment opportunities. Second, the woman was involved in several abusive relationships, which likely affected her ability to earn. Third, she was a single mother with significant child rearing responsibilities. Fourth, she has suffered from several disabling medical ailments over and above the PTSD suffered as a result of her father's sexual abuse. Fifth, this woman moved to the USA by choice. She must mitigate her loss of income as a lawyer by attempting to qualify in the US or attempt to find employment where she might be capable of performing. Basically, everything this woman suffered her entire life has made it harder for her to have a career and live on her own, responsible for herself. And she went to the court. Do you know how much she was asking them to award her? $300,000, which seems ridiculously low to me. But the judge is like, oh yeah, you're definitely getting the $300,000. But ultimately, they also calculated that she deserves a hell of a lot more than that. And check this out here. In general damages, this is what she asked for, $300,000. Yes, but there are aggravated damages and interest and past economic loss and future economic loss and past out-of-pocket expenses for legal fees and future legal fees. And it boils down to about $1.5 million. And so what did the judge say after all this? I make the following orders. Give this woman $1.5 million and the dad has to pay it. And there's that. So that is good news. The Jehovah's Witnesses, unfortunately, have to pay none of that. But it does reveal how they had the opportunity to take serious action against the father. They chose not to. They told this woman not to go to the police. They prolonged the number of years it took before she saw any kind of justice. I mean, it's no wonder they were described in this decision as cult-like. And in a news report about all this, I saw Jehovah's Witnesses saying, if there is something we can take away from this situation, they're hoping that the news reports about this payout and what happened to this woman, hopefully it will shed light on how the Jehovah's Witnesses protect abusers, because that is what they are doing. And they are also asking the Australian government to essentially revoke the tax-exempt status of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And that would basically be a death knell for the organization, because it would hamper their ability to raise money. That's why none of the groups in the United States want to lose their tax exempt statuses. But in Australia, where they take this stuff a little more seriously, this church would lose a ton of money that it needs to survive if their tax exempt status was revoked. So, I mean, the Jehovah's Witnesses elders, they were not confused or unaware. They heard credible allegations and did nothing about it. They saw threatening behavior firsthand in front of them. They heard an admission when the dad said, I stepped out of line. And they still didn't want one of their own to take a fall here. And by discouraging police involvement, by threatening this woman with shunning, they basically promoted the abuse. And that's the system working as intended. It's why people are demanding change. I don't even think $1.5 million is enough for what this woman has been through, but at least there's some symbolic significance here because the judge is accepting her story in a way her religious leaders never did. And that is not nothing. But I mean, you can't trust these religious leaders to protect children when it means admitting that their own beliefs and their systems are part of the problem. Like, their methods only make things worse. And in this case, it was delayed justice, but most of the time it's denied entirely. So that's why this decision made a lot of headlines in Australia. People want accountability. Survivors deserve accountability, but so often we see religion being used as an immunity against any sort of justice. And if you're taking in like over $14 million in donations every year while shielding abusers and silencing victims, you should not be rewarded by the government with the tax exempt status, much less any sort of public trust. All right, what other questions we got here? Only 3. I forgot what that's even in reference to at this point. Sorry. I'm trying to wipe this story. Oh yeah, the dad only got 3 years in prison for what he did. I'm not sure what all the specifics of that legal case were, the prosecution against the dad and whatnot. I know it seems like nothing. I don't know what they counted and what they dismissed. So I don't know if that's not enough or that's the best they could get or what. Yeah, he suffered for 3 years. She suffers for a lifetime. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Did she really get justice when her dad goes away to prison for 3 years? Because she's cut off from everybody in that environment. A person who represents themselves has a fool for a client. A famous quotation. I will say I've heard a couple of cases where someone's representing themselves and they're actually good at it. But usually when I see people who are writing their own lawsuits because they want to file one, or they are representing themselves in court, it's usually not because they're going to do a good job of it. And it shows in the work, which in this case, you know what? I don't even feel bad about it. Disfellowshipped a la Owen Morgan. Right. Telltale on YouTube has talked about this a lot. He was disfellowshipped too. Yeah. It's a good channel if you get a chance to watch it. Do you think the entire world will become atheist in the next 200 years? In the next 200 years? No. I mean, religion is going to be around. My hope is that it's less extreme forms. Quite honestly, I don't think at this rate we're going to be around in 200 years the way things are going. So I'm actually optimistic. I'm surprised you're optimistic about the fact that we'll be around and debating religion at that time. And now that we're out of the worst of it, I want a petition for Friendly Atheist merch that says, so that's disturbing. Yeah, it seems to come up at least once or twice a week at this point, doesn't it? All right, I got one more story for you. This one's going to be a fast one because it's late. All right, I think I'm good. Let's do this. Last story I wanted to share with you today. I saw this headline and I thought I was looking at a news article from like 20 years ago, and it's not. It's absolutely recent, but it involves this guy right here. He is Senator David Farnsworth. He's a state senator in Arizona, and he has just introduced a bill What's it going to do? Can you take a guess? I will show you the entire bill. It is going to inject creationism into public schools. Here's the whole bill. It's 2 pages long. Senate Bill 1025, and all of it is right there in the blue. Notwithstanding any other law, a public school may provide instruction in evolution by natural selection only if the school provides concurrent instruction in intelligent design. So this guy's bill says, all right, if you want to teach evolution, that's fine, but you can only teach evolution if you teach intelligent design as well. He is introducing this bill in the year of our Lord 2025. That's what this Republican is doing. It's a poison pill. It says you can't educate students unless you also infect their minds with Christian mythology. And when a newspaper reporter asked him about this bill, this guy's defenses are not very good. Here's one of the things he said to Howard Fisher of Arizona Capital Media right here. If we're going to teach that man came from monkeys, I think we ought to give a choice, the Republican said. I'm going to skip down here. And Farnsworth made no bones about the fact that while he is using the phrase intelligent design, he knows what this is about. If it were up to me, I would just call it creationism. Like, you're not supposed to say that out loud. Those of you who are old enough, you remember when there were the intelligent design wars in like 2005-ish, and the intelligent design people went so much out of their way to be like, it's totally not creationism. Of course, creationism is illegal. The Supreme Court said you can't teach creationism in like 1987. We're not doing that. We're doing intelligent design. And then famously, in the Dover case that was decided in 2005, they literally found examples of intelligent design textbooks that they had literally replaced like creationist with design proponent. Like they did copy pasting. They replaced the creator with like designer. And it was so sloppy that there was evidence of that happening. But all the intelligent design people were like, it's not creationism. It's not the same thing. And here's this idiot from Arizona who's like, yeah, of course it's the same thing. And he's just saying that out loud. In any case, man did not come from monkeys. We have a common ancestor, and people who use that creationist talking point, like Ken Ham, they basically are admitting they have no clue what evolution is. And yet they all think they're smart enough to micromanage science curriculums and things like that. One of the other things I appreciated, this guy, Howard Fisher, the reporter for Capital Media Services, he even asked this guy, is there any evidence for intelligent design? And look at what Farnsworth said. I don't need to prove that to you, Farnsworth said. To me, it's what I know in my heart is true, besides all the biblical references. I don't need to prove that to you. That's kind of how science works. It's what I know in my heart is true. That is not how we teach science anywhere. What the hell? And to those who don't see it that way, I honestly think that people that don't think that we were created by God are not very intelligent individuals themselves, he said. I believe the best evidence is if we pray and ask God what the truth is, along with our diligent study. Like, my God, these are just embarrassing answers. Everyone who's not me and who accepts evolution, those people are, quote, dumb. I think evidence is when we pray and just have God speak to us in our minds and say whatever the hell he wants. Like, this is the worst spokesperson the intelligent design people could possibly have. And I do appreciate that at least one Democrat called him out on all of this. This is State Senator Mitzi Epstein. This is what she said. I think that understanding the scientific method is something that maybe we should request lawmakers to learn before they write bills. Like, beautiful, beautifully said. It would be nice if these people knew what they were talking about before they decided to file a bill on it. But as we saw with Pete Hegseth earlier, you don't have to know anything to pretend you're an expert at stuff. Now, the good news here is that this bill is dead on arrival. It's not going anywhere. Republicans do have narrow majorities in the Arizona House and Arizona Senate, but thankfully the governor is a Democrat, Katie Hobbs. There's no way she's signing this bill into law. And also, this bill violates all the laws. The Supreme Court struck down creationism in public schools in 87. Another court got rid of intelligent design in 2005, mostly because it is creationism. And all the attempts since then to challenge evolution through Christian bullshit, they might have said, we got to teach the strengths and weaknesses of scientific theories. We got to teach the holes in evolution. Those things have gone nowhere. I mean, you can't shove Christian mythology into a science class, no matter how much Ken Ham wants to pretend you can. And Farnsworth was also asked by this reporter, hey, what happens when you get sued if this bill were to pass? And guess what he said about that one? I'm not an attorney and I'm not even gonna try. Try what? To defend this? Anyway, Farnsworth said, such court rulings are based on the flawed premise that there's supposed to be a separation between church and state. Yikes. So this guy not only doesn't accept evolution, he doesn't believe in the Constitution either, but he's not an attorney. He just knows better than all the attorneys who will tell you he's full of shit. It's still disturbing, though, that a Republican is wasting his time in elected office promoting this nonsense. It shows you how little respect he has for public schools and students' educations and teachers and anyone who knows what they're talking about. This guy would rather destroy kids' minds than help them achieve a strong scientific foundation for their future academic life. I mean, he's not even educating himself on any of this stuff. He actually said he filed it because it was an idea proposed by one of his constituents, which, I don't know. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to your constituents, but maybe don't listen to the dumbest constituents and do your due diligence. And you're the elected official. You don't just, your Facebook page is not just a tell me what to do and I'll do it. And if it is, then fine. I got some ideas for bills you ought to propose. Are you going to listen to them or what? So he also said he promised this dude he would introduce this bill. I don't know why you have to hold that particular promise, but okay. So right now this bill has been introduced, but there are no committee hearings that have been scheduled. Incidentally, I looked up this guy. He is a Mormon whose biography says he has 32 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren, which is too many. It's too many. You don't need that many. Also, one of the other bills he has co-sponsored this particular legislative session is renaming a section of road. Can you guess? The Charlie Kirk Highway. But anyway, it's this whole thing. It's a reminder that creationism is never about evidence. It's just a way to sneak religion into a place where it doesn't belong. Evolution does not have a viable alternative. Intelligent design is definitely not that alternative. And just because Republicans want to sabotage public schools doesn't mean anyone should take this seriously, right? It's funny that they care about, like, you need choice in science class and literally nowhere else. This guy doesn't, this guy has so many kids and he doesn't give a damn about children, right? Like, evolution is foundational to biology, medicine, genetics, environmental science. Undercutting it, which is what this guy is doing, it weakens students' ability to understand the world. It is so deeply irresponsible. And the people of Arizona deserve so much better than this religious zealot who has no clue what he's talking about, but wants to file a bill about it. I mean, the good news is he's going to fail, but also, I don't know, is this the first of many bills we're about to see? Is creationism back in other states? I don't know. This guy wants to just indoctrinate kids instead of educate them, and voters should remember that in the future. All right, so I think I'm done there. If there's any last questions, we'll do those. Just another prop they can waive is persecution. What, this bill that's going to be knocked down? Probably. I don't know why you file a bill like this that has no support whatsoever from the people you need an in from. Epstein. Just remember, the Epstein files have to come out tomorrow. Mary Epstein miss. They're not going to come out. Republicans will find a way to delay it. That's my prediction. But yay, glad it was forced. Glad they're trying. I remember this person telling me, oh, does Emmett celebrate any winter holidays? All of them. We do all of them in my house because my kids love presents. So Hanukkah, sure. Christmas, why not? If there are other Boxing Day, is that a thing still? We'll do Boxing Day. Whatever. They'll do everything. We have no allegiances in this home. All right, we're done. Thank you so much. I know it was a long one. I should be back next week, probably Christmas Eve, if Den is able to do that as well. And hopefully I'll see some of you then. And otherwise, have a safe holiday season with whatever it is you're celebrating. You know the drill with all the stuff. Oh, by the way, the crossword's out now. Go do it. The New York Times crossword. It's mine. Support the channel, patreon.com/Hemant. And subscribe to the newsletter at friendlyatheist.com. I think that's it. I'll see you next time. Have a good week.